Okay. Thank you. Okay, my name's Matt Tito. I'm calling to order the second quarter meeting of the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. Today is June 23rd, 2023, and the time is now 10:07 a.m. We have a very busy agenda today. Today we will take up the minutes from March 31st. We will have a division update from John Dario. Both the Code Development Team and the Energy Services Team will update us on their progress with regard to the 2024 codes that we're working towards. We're going to have a presentation from Homeland Security on automated fire sprinkler suppression systems, and then we have a very busy public comment period today. It looks like we have about 50 members of the public now looking to address us today. Given that fact, we're going to ask members of the public to limit their comments to 3 minutes today. I know these are some passionate issues for a lot of people, and I'm just going to ask that you be concise in your comments. I'll give you about a 15-second warning when you're coming to the end of your 3 minutes, and then I'll ask you to stop when we get to that point. I'm also going to note that we're going to take a lunch break somewhere around noon, maybe 15-20 minutes. I know we don't normally do that, but we have a long day ahead, so I want to make sure everyone is feeling strong as we get
Talk a little louder.
louder.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Got it. Okay, I've been told to talk louder, so no, sorry. With that, actually, I'm going to turn it over to you. Speak loudly.
Take the roll. Matt Tebow,
I'm here.
James Cable,
Here.
Michael Weber,
Here.
Vincent Rapasciulo,
Here.
Joseph DeStefano,
Here.
Claudia Bramer,
Here.
Joseph Toomey,
Here.
Sean Hamlin,
Here.
Timothy DeRusher, here, Robert Hughes,
Here.
Buffalo office, William Tyne,
Here.
Dominic Marinelli,
Here.
New York City office, Keith Wen,
Here.
and Michael Sabatino.
Here.
And let me check one more time for Patrick Dolan on remote. No Patrick Dolan. So we have 14 present at locations open to the public.
Thank you, Kevin.
So I guess just a quick announcement for logistics. If the people who aren't in Albany, the other locations, and any staff that are on the line, if you could just make sure you mute yourselves unless you're speaking. And when you do unmute and when people do speak, if you could state your name for the court reporter, that would help her out. That's it. That's all I have.
Okay. Kevin, are there any agenda changes for today?
No agenda changes.
Okay, thank you so much. That moves us out of agenda item 1 and on to agenda item 2. Draft minutes of the meeting of March 31, 2022. You should have, 2023. You should have received them in your packages. Does anyone have any potential changes to those draft minutes? Okay. Hearing none. May I have a motion to adopt the draft minutes of March 31st, 2023? Tim makes the motion. Can I have a second? Joe seconds the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Motion carries and the minutes of March 31st, 2023 are adopted. That is the last vote we're going to take today. Moving to agenda item 3, division update, John Adario. John's on the system. John?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Okay, thank you. I just have a couple quick updates on some existing items that we've discussed previously, and I have one new item for the council. Regarding Part 1208, which are the rules, regulations for the minimum standards for code enforcement training. The rules need to go into effect on April 27th of this year. As you may remember, the rule was changed to align with recent modifications of the executive law, which includes the training timeframe for obtaining certification for BSIs and CEOs. So it is now 6 months from appointment date for BSIs and 12 months for CEOs. And previously it was 18 months for both, from their initial appointment date or start of training. So, also, enforcement activity was changed to be that a BSI must complete 1/3 of the training in order to conduct fire safety inspections, and the CEO must complete 2/3 of the CEO training to perform CEO activity, or 1/6 of the training to perform BSI activity. The other change to that was in the regulations was to allow DOS to accept nationally recognized certification in lieu of basic training. So again, that rule went into effect on April 27th of this year. And I just have a couple updates on some technical issues. We did end up publishing a COP, which is our Code Outreach Program document that was sent out to our listserv and posted on our website that addressed the updated Part 1203. Obviously, I don't think everybody knows, we did go in effect on December 30th, 2022. Councilmember Hughes had made mention of one of the provisions in that in 1203 that was a source of confusion. So we did come out with a COP that's specifically addressed fire safety and property maintenance inspections of public schools, and clarifies that it does not place any additional responsibilities on city, towns, or villages where said public schools are located, because the state education is and continues to be the AHJ for these buildings. Additionally, the technical bulletin explains that the update to Part 1203 simply clarifies that the AHJ, which is state ed, has the option to rely on inspections performed by others, provided that such inspections are in compliance with Part 1203. And the last item I have is a technical bulletin that we are currently working on that deals with the transition to lower GWP refrigerants, such as the A2Ls, and how they are addressed in the code. So as a reminder, the Advanced Building Code Act of 2022, under Section 24, states in summary that a building code or other requirement applicable to commercial or residential buildings or construction may not prohibit the use of substances allowed pursuant to the EPA significant alternative policy to implement under federal law, which is titled Safety Alternatives Policy, provided that such substance in refrigerant or air conditioning system or other equipment and products utilize such substance are designed and used in accordance with the nationally recognized published standards. So just to clarify that, we actually are developing a technical bulletin that use of different refrigerants classified by the updated version of ASHRAE 34. And again, just to those that don't know, ASHRAE is one of the reference standards reference in the Uniform Code. It's actually the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. So Standard 34 deals with the designation and classification of refrigerants. There is actually a new standard they came out with last year, at the end of last year. So there is also an updated companion ASHRAE document, which is Standard 15, which establishes the procedures for operating the equipment standards when using those refrigerants. So the technical bulletin clarifies that the code does not expressly prohibit the use of those specific refrigerants. However, again, just the use of those refrigerants may be restricted under certain circumstances. So it also points out that CEO may approve alternative refrigerants based on the newer standards under Section 104, which is the alternate materials, methods, and equipment. And then using that Section 104 by the code enforcement official in this way meets the intent of Section 24 of the law. So that is all I have at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Do any council members have questions for John? Okay, hearing none. Next is Penny-Oda.
Good morning. So since our last meeting in March on May 3rd,
Sorry to interrupt.
as part-
Could you please state your name?
Oh, sure. Panayota Hyde.
Thank you.
So on May 3rd, 2023, as part of the budget, the governor signed Chapter 56 of the laws of 2023, which amends Energy Law Section 11104 and Executive Law Sections 371 and 378. Section 1 of Part RR amends Section 11104, which is where the Energy Code subject matter is included, to add a new paragraph B to subdivision 6, which would provide that to support the goal of zero on-site greenhouse gas emissions and help achieve the state's clean energy and climate agenda, including but not limited to greenhouse gas reduction requirements set forth within Chapter 106 of the laws of 2019. The Energy Code shall prohibit the installation of fossil fuel equipment and building systems in any new building not more than 7 stories in height, except for a new commercial or industrial building greater than 100,000 square feet in conditioned floor area on or after December 31st, 2025. And the Energy Code shall prohibit the installation of fossil fuel equipment and building systems in all new buildings after December 31st, 2028. A new subdivision 7 of Section 11104 provides that the provisions set forth in paragraph B shall not be construed as applying to buildings existing prior to the effective date of the applicable prohibition, including to 1, the repair, alteration, addition, relocation, or change of occupancy or use of such buildings, and 2, the installation or continued use and maintenance of fossil fuel equipment and building systems, including as related to cooking equipment in any such buildings. The Energy Code shall also include exemptions for the purposes of allowing the installation and use of fossil fuel equipment and building systems where such are installed and used, 1, for generation of emergency backup power and stand-up power systems, 2, in a manufactured home as defined in Executive Law 601, Subdivision 7, 3, in a building or a part of a building that is used as a manufacturing facility, commercial food establishment, laboratory, car wash, laundromat, hospital, other medical facility, critical infrastructure, including but not limited to emergency management facilities, wastewater treatment facilities, and water treatment and pumping facilities, agricultural building, fuel cell system, or crematorium, as such terms are defined by the Code Council. Other than manufactured homes or agricultural buildings as defined by the Code Council, where the Energy Code includes an allowed exemption, such exemption shall include provisions that to the fullest extent feasible limit the use of fossil fuel equipment and building systems to the system and area of the building for which a prohibition on fossil fuel equipment and building systems is infeasible, require the area or service within a new building where fossil fuel equipment and building systems are installed to be electrification ready, except with respect to servicing manufacturing or industrial processes, and minimize emissions from the fossil fuel equipment and building systems that are allowed to be used, provided that the provisions do not adversely affect health, safety, security, or fire protection. And financial consideration shall not be sufficient basis to determine physical or technical infeasibility. These exemptions included in the Energy Code shall be periodically reviewed by the Code Council to assure that they continue to effectuate the purposes of Energy Law, Section 11104, Subdivision 6. And the Energy Code shall also allow for exemption of new building construction projects that requires an application for new or expanded electric service pursuant to Public Service Law Section 31, Subdivision 1, and Transportation Corporation Law Section 12, when electric service cannot be reasonably provided by the grid as operated by the local electric corporation or municipality pursuant to Public Service Law Section 65, Subdivision 1. Provided, however, the Public Service Commission shall determine reasonableness for the purposes of this exemption. And the new subdivision 8 of Section 11104 defines fossil fuel equipment and building systems to mean 1, equipment as such term is defined in Energy Law Section 11102, that uses fossil fuel for combustion, or 2, systems other than items supporting an industrial or commercial process as referred to in the definition of equipment in Energy Law Section 11102, associated with the building that will be used for or to support the supply, distribution, or delivery of fossil fuel for any purpose other than for use by motor vehicles. And electrification ready shall mean the new building or portion thereof where the fossil fuel equipment and building systems are allowed to be used, which contains electrical systems and designs and provide sufficient capacity for future replacement of such fossil fuel equipment and building systems with electric powered equipment, including but not limited to sufficient space, drainage, electrical conductors or raceways, bus bar capacity, and overcurrent protective devices for such electric powered equipment. So that's for the energy law. Then section 2 of part RR amends Executive Law 371, which is the statement of legislative findings and purposes, to include a new subparagraph 3 of paragraph B of subdivision 2 to provide, in providing for a uniform code, it is declared to be the public policy of the state of New York to recognize that the decarbonization of new and existing buildings is closely related to the state's clean energy and climate agenda as described in the New York Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act set forth in Chapter 106 of the laws of 2019, and the Uniform Code shall enable the state's clean energy objectives. And then section 3 of part R amends section 378 of the executive law to mirror, in essence, what section 11104 does for the energy code, so that both our uniform code and energy code will be aligned. And as part of the code development process, the department will begin to draft rules amending the uniform code and energy code in the manner required by these new statutory provisions. Stay tuned for more. The other piece that the budget bill included was part T of chapter 57 of the laws of 2023, which amends public health law section 1370 and adds a new section 1377 to the public health law and amends executive law section 381. Section 1 of part T amends title 10 of the public health law, control of lead poisoning, to add a new subdivision 8 to section 1370 defining owner. And then section 2 of part T adds a new section 1377 to the public health law, providing that the Department of Health, in consultation with the Division of Housing and Community Renewal, shall develop a registry for all residential dwellings with 2 or more units built prior to 1980, which by virtue of their property class designation are potentially eligible for rent, lease, let, or hiring out, and are located within communities of concern as identified by the Department of Health. Owners of all residential dwellings qualifying for registration shall certify as free of lead paint hazards in accordance with Public Health Law Section 1377, Subdivision 7, and the regulations promulgated thereunder. Such regulations shall take effect by November 30th, 2025. Section 3 of Part T amends Subdivision 1 of Executive Law 381, which is our administration and enforcement of the Uniform Code and Energy Code, to add a new paragraph J, which provides that the rules and regulations promulgated by the Secretary prescribing minimum standards for administration and enforcement of the Uniform and Energy Code shall include procedures requiring the documentation of compliance with regulations adopted pursuant to Public Health Law 1377 as a condition to issuance of a certificate of occupancy or certificate of compliance following a periodic fire safety and property maintenance inspection for multiple dwellings. And that piece of the law will take effect May 3rd, 2026. So once the regulations are promulgated by DOH by November 3rd of 2025, we will make corollary amendments to Part 1203 in the future. So those are the two pieces, and we have been and we will continue to work with the Department of Health and the DHCR through the rulemaking process. That's the two budget bill pieces. The last item I have is prior to this meeting, I had circulated draft rule text for amending Part 1263 of Title 19 regarding our seeker regulations, which were outdated. I did receive one comment back saying that it looks good and no other comments. So we did file a notice of proposed rulemaking to update Part 1263 on June 20th, and it will appear in the July 5th State Register.
Okay,
That's all I have.
thank you, Peniota. Obviously, we pay her by the word. I know there was a lot there. So do any council members have any questions concerning Part RR, Part T, or the seeker regs? Claudia?
In time in Buffalo?
Hold on, Bill. We're gonna start with Claudia.
Okay.
When you were talking about the budget changes and the exemptions, and at one point you said the code council would be reviewing definitions, or if those are already in there, I'm not sure, the definitions of some of those terms, and then that we would review the applicability of the exemptions in the future. Is that something we are doing now in this initial round as these changes are incorporated?
They are not going to be in the update as of today.
No, not as of today.
Right, but they will be eventually integrated into our Uniform Code and Energy Code. So both what you identified, defining those terms, the Code Council will have to do, and then thereafter, the Code Council will have to periodically review the exemptions once we draft the language.
Does the new statute say how often we're supposed to review them?
It does not.
No.
Periodically.
Good lawyer language. Thank you.
Sure. Bill from Buffalo.
Thank you. I have some concerns regarding the details of implementation of some of these new rules, that the laws are, I think, ignorant of the process that takes place in the field. I understand that the council is going to have to amend the code to be compliant with state law, and that ship has sailed. But one of the details is when a real estate developer builds a development, and they're going to build a bunch of homes in a subdivision. Those homes are less than 7 stories, and at the end of 2025, beginning on January 1st of 26, you're not going to be allowed to hook it up to gas. What I don't think people realize is that when you build a development, you put in the infrastructure and the streets are dedicated and ownership is taken over by the municipality, then building permits can be issued at that point. But when you're putting it in and you're building sewer and water lines and drainage systems and pavement and curbing, you also have to put in the energy utilities. And those energy utilities are paid for by the developer. And they're put in on electric for multinational corporations, and for gas, big companies. And we pay that money as an industry to put those facilities in the ground. And the rules are that once you put them in the ground, you get paid back for that money that you spend, which is for a relatively small subdivision. We're talking about 6-figure numbers. They're not small. And you get paid back incrementally, lot by lot, as you bring the utility company a customer with a spinning meter. And you get 5 years to get your payback. And if you have a house that goes in that is beyond that 5-year deadline, you forfeit any monies that you've already paid. Utility company gets to move on, and they don't pay attention to the accounting of it anymore. You just forfeit any money you spent. So if a development goes in this summer, it's going to take till the end of the year before you get streets that are public and you can get building permits from the municipality. Then you're going to pull building permits and you're going to start building houses, which are not all going to happen out of the gate. Every single house started. Even if you, on day one, on January 1st of next year, you pulled a building permit, it's going to take 6 months to a year to build a single house. You get 5 years to get your money back. But the clock is already ticking, and January 1st of 2026 is looming, and you're going to have a year and a half of your 5 years to get payback, and you're going to forfeit 3.5 years of that 5-year period, which is regulated by the Public Service Commission. They track all these things under tariffs. So I don't see anything in any regulation or in the law that contemplates any of this. You're just going to put this in the ground, and be told to forfeit your money because you will be prohibited from connecting to gas. So I don't know how we handle that or what provisions can be made to grandfather developments that go in before 2026 and they get their 5 years to connect and get paid back. And none of that's in this. So I would hope there's some ability to think this through a little bit because we got a little time before it has to be implemented. But I have real serious concerns about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Okay. Hearing none, we move to the next topic on the agenda. Okay, agenda item 4, Uniform Code and Energy Code updates. Which way do we start?
I'll go first.
You'll go first. Okay, turning over to Kevin from the Code Development Unit.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about general timeline and in general about how the updates are going. I'll pass it off to Dan, and then for energy code, and then back to me for uniform code. So we gave an update on the timeline at the March 31st, 2023 meeting. At this point, we don't have any major updates to the timeline that we gave then. Since then, staff has begun integrating the 2024 and 2021 ICC code changes together, which is basically blending a series of code changes that aren't officially published by ICC yet with the 2021s that are officially published and making them into one document for everyone to review. We've also, to date, have just received the plumbing code and mechanical code from ICC. So that happened, I believe, at the end of last week or beginning of this week that we got those code books. So they're starting to trickle in for the 2024 books, but the process we're doing now is keeping us ahead of the 2024 books. In your packets, everybody should have received the version 2.0 draft documents. Those, again, are just draft documents. They only include the 24 and 21 ICC code change proposals. Staff has not analyzed those proposals yet as far as impacts to New York State. It doesn't include any typical New York State modifications that we would make to them, any modification based on New York State statute or amended statutes. None of that is in there yet. This is strictly at this point 21 and 24 ICC code changes that are in there. I know it's a lot of information. Obviously, the co-council members got the second version, earlier this week. So I encourage the co-council members, in between the meetings to reach out to us with any comments or questions or concerns or anything that comes up. Email us directly. Next phase, we'll take the next step. We'll start to blend in all those things that I said that are not currently in these documents, like the New York State specific changes that we make, and start assessing the actual impact of those changes. And so I guess for now, I'll turn it over to Dan to discuss specifically what's in the energy code document that you received.
Hi everyone, I'm Dan Carroll with the Energy.
Dan, hold on one second.
Just as a matter of question, so I understand we're going to the 2024 I-codes is the basis for the updated code. Is there statutory requirements that we show that there's a difference between the current code we have in effect to the 21 and to the 24, or can we skip the 21, save some effort, and go directly to the 24? I mean, why are we going and reviewing everything, including the 21, if we're adopting the 24 versions?
So I guess what we're showing are the differences between the current 2020 New York State codes, which are based on the 2018 codes. We have to show what's changing from that code to our future code. And what changed, and part of that was what happened in 21 and what happened in 24. So we're showing the progression. Some things that happened in 21 weren't further modified in 24, but we still need to see the change in 21.
So there is statutory requirements to show that there's a change and what that change was.
I'm not sure what you mean by statutory.
It's a requirement that we have to do in the process rather than making the decision to go to the 24. Again, I'm trying to understand why do we have to show the 21 changes if presumably the 21 changes are in the 24 code? And it would seem it would make it a lot easier for everybody,
I guess
unless I'm missing something here.
for me, it's for transparency so everyone can see exactly what is happening and changing through the
Okay,
regulatory
all right.
process.
We have to do rules, right, when we're adopting these, so when we're doing the rules, we have to go through the rulemaking process and we have to identify what current existing rule is compared to what we're gonna be proposing. And one way of doing that, especially with the magnitude of the books that we have involved here, because we're incorporating these by reference, we wanna be clear exactly what changes we're making and identifying what those are.
Okay, no issues, just trying to get clarification, thank you.
I can
Robert?
understand it's possible to be something that could be in the 2021 that's not in our current 20 code, which of course was on the 2018, which wouldn't show up in the 2024. So if we outright adopted 2024, we could overlook something that was changed during that 3 years.
Right, it won't come up as a change in 24 because it was changed in
So we
24.
might automatically accidentally adopt something that we actually didn't analyze, hence why you'd have to analyze the 2021 and the 2020.
Exactly. Anyone else on timeline? Claudia?
I know you went over this last meeting, but just top level, when do these changes that we're working on now actually go into effect? To the question about, people's ability to adjust and know when they have to do things like stop planning on connecting to natural gas.
Yeah, so I guess the high level timeline that we had presented last time would be a notice of rule and development going out in the fall, which would be kind of the first preliminary step in the regulatory process. Once we get all the comments in from that, then we would assess those comments. I guess they're not public comments because it's the rule and development phase. Around the December meeting, we'd hopefully be able to start presenting what the notice of proposed rulemaking documents would start to look like this December into the early first quarter of next year. Following that, we would have the official public comment period, and which would start to spill into the June 2024 meeting, with the plan for the September to December timeframe of next year to be the timeframe for vote on the notice of adoption. After that, there's still time that happens after that. There's a 90-day effective timeframe for the uniform code to go into effect, plus ICC publication process after that. So,
We're talking January 2025.
now we're into early 2025 timeframe in the perfect world.
Notice of adoption in late 24, and then you have the period that he's talking about.
Right.
That's what we're aiming for right now.
Right.
Which still
It
gives
gives people time.
Which would also bring us up to much better association with the ICC than we've ever been.
we will be at pretty much the tip of the spear, yes.
In the grand scheme.
In the grand scheme of the 100 or so members of the International Code Council, we'll be right at the front. I don't actually know of any other state right now that is taking their materials even before they're coming out. So,
I would agree.
okay, any other questions on timeline?
Yeah, I'm just gonna remind you guys, just speak up a bit, it's a little hard hearing back here. There's the fan and
The fan is quite loud, yeah. Thank you. All right, I'm turning it over to Dan Carroll, who's sitting in for Emma today, who is in a much happier place than us. Dan, you're up.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So Kevin has provided you with a copy of version 2 of the Energy Code Update document. Version 2.0 builds upon the earlier version we provided prior to the March meeting. The version of the document that you saw in March contained proposed code changes made as a result of the changes to the energy law that took place on July 5th, 2022. As Emma explained in March, by large, proposed modifications in that version pertain to provisions for historic buildings developed in consultation with the State Historic Preservation Office and consolidation of exceptions to the Energy Code. In addition to those proposed changes, version 2.0 also includes proposed modifications based on the 2021 International Energy Conservation Code update, proposed changes received by the division since the adoption of the 2020 Energy Conservation Code of New York State, including some provisions taken from New York Stretch 2020 that modify the 2020 Energy Conservation Code of New York State, and editorial modifications. You can see on the cover sheet a notation indicating the origin of changes made to specific code sections. As before, the formatting of the document indicates proposed deletions as crossed out red text, proposed new language as underlined blue text. Additionally, we've highlighted new sections that distinguish them from those you've previously seen. In response to the request from Keith Wen made during the March meeting, the descriptions on the cover sheet have been expanded to summarize the nature of the change more clearly. We anticipate that future versions of this document will include modifications based on provisions from New York Stretch 2020 that modify ASHRAE 90.1, the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code update, and New York State specific statutory provisions. In addition to that, NYSERDA intends to submit for the Council's consideration their proposed recommendations for achieving energy savings greater than the energy savings achieved by the most recently published version of the International Energy Conservation Code for residential buildings and ASHRAE 90.1 for commercial buildings, consistent with the requirements of Section 11-103 2B of the Energy Law. We look forward to seeing any questions, comments, or feedback you might be sending to Kevin. Thank you, and thank you, Matt.
Okay, so obviously the energy code from an international code perspective, ICC perspective, is a little behind the rest of the code. So we are starting to see, as Kevin noted, some of the smaller codes, and we expect the bigger ones to be filtering in. But the energy code is likely to be the last. Also, we have the greatest number of potential changes going into that energy code. So it's a bit of a three-dimensional chess game right now. And our staff is working very hard, Dan, thank you, to get everything ready and into as we go. So it is, it's gonna be a ride. And as Emma said last time, we went from this big, now we're up to about this big. I expect it's gonna keep getting bigger. We're gonna try and highlight to everybody as we move from meeting to meeting, what's new. So hopefully you can read right along instead of having to try and catch up with everything as we get towards the spot where we actually will be seeing code language, which I do not expect until the end of this year. Okay. Does anyone have questions for Dan? Keeping in mind that Dan's sitting in for Emma, and we'll do our best. But does anyone have questions for Dan? Claudia.
Well, some of it I think is addressed in the draft document, so hopefully I'm not putting Dan too much on the spot, but it talks about that what we were seeing today, still obviously an early draft, includes the Advanced Building Code, so I'm talking Energy Code, Advanced Building Codes Act, which was passed last year. And it does say that the provisions of New York Stretch 2020 are in here, are incorporated in today's, some of them, okay, but more, we expect to have more New York Stretch incorporated into a future draft.
So the provisions from New York Stretch 2020 that are in here are ones that we are proposing to accept. NYSERDA intends to submit provisions from an updated document that they have. I think it's the 2023 stretch. They're going to submit those proposals separately to the council as recommendations for achieving energy savings greater than the savings achieved by the most recently published IECC, which would be the 2024 at that point. So yeah, there will be other stretch provisions, but they're going to be for the 2023 stretch, not the 2020 stretch.
The stretch provisions that you're seeing right now are based on 2020 I-codes.
Yeah,
they're working on new stretch proposals that are going to be based on the 2024 and including some of the 2021. So they're also sort of moving stretches for moving stretches.
Also, going on, some of the provisions in 2020 stretch are already being covered in the 2021 I-codes and the 2024 I-codes, so there was no reason to incorporate them.
Okay.
The things that we did incorporate, we identified as not being identified in those codes.
Okay. And then Penny Oda said, like the provisions that just passed in the budget, they're obviously not in today's draft, but you're working on incorporating those in. Maybe we'll see them in the fall, at the fall meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And then I just have one more, I think you just answered it, but, you had said that NYSERDA was giving further recommendations, so those are all based on the 2023 stretch, it sounds like. But I was wondering if there are any further recommendations from the climate scoping plan or anything coming out of the CLCPA. I thought the Climate Action Committee had given our council specific recommendations. Now, maybe those are already wrapped up in the statutory changes, but I'll go back and look at that.
Yeah, I think that's something we do need to go back and look at. I believe that the statute incorporated those changes. I'm trying to think if there might be a difference or two that we would discuss, but not necessarily be required to put in as we are with what came in the statute. So I'll join you in that review over the
Great.
summer.
Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Anyone else on energy?
New York City.
Hi, Ken. Hi,
Yeah.
Keith.
Morning. So I have one comment and I have one question. So the first comment is I want to thank the Code Council staff for adopting my recommendation for having additional information. I know it's a lot of work, but it's very helpful and it's going to really shorten our review tremendously. So thank you for that. I have a specific question about ASCE 7. Do we know which version we are adopting? This is more of a general question, maybe not particular to the energy code, but ASCE 7 is the minimum design loads and associated criteria for buildings and other structures. So it's a structural related reference standard. Do we know offhand?
I don't know offhand, but I can certainly get that information to the council members.
That would be fine, Kevin. Thank you for that. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because if you are adopting the ASCE 722 version, there has been 2 supplements since the publication. So I would suggest that you folks also take a look at the supplements and not forget that. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Anyone else on energy? Okay. Hearing none, back to you, Kevin, to talk to us about the uniform code side.
Yes, the whole stack of paper that is here.
And I appreciate you putting this there for me.
So, with the exception of the building code, all of the other code books have 100% of the 2024, 2021 code changes blended together. You'll notice some differences between version 2 and version 1, and I'll just describe them here so it's a little clearer. The documents are now sorted by section. Previously, we sorted them by code change proposal, but when blending them with the 21s, that lost its effectiveness. So now we put them by section and blended them all together. So you'll see a single section with potentially multiple changes, some from 21, some from 24, but it's in section order now, which I think reads better in the end. Like Matt and Dan said, we also highlighted in yellow the things that have changed from version 1 to version 2. So when you pick up version 2, it'll be a lot easier to digest having reviewed version 1. Just look at the yellow if you really needed to. You'll be able to easily pop out all the things that are different. The building code is obviously one of the largest books that we have. It's about 50% done, and it's the largest stack here with about 400 pages in it. So we're going to continue moving forward with blending those 21s and 24s together. I'll use the property maintenance code again as a quick example of some of the things that you'll see because it's the smallest books, and we're able to get a little bit further with it than we did with some of the larger books. Some of the things you'll see are comments that say things like New York State to review this change in light of Executive Law X. So again, emphasizing that these are 21, 24 ICC code change proposals, and staff has not compared them to typical changes that New York State would make or any statutory requirements. This comment is noting, you know what, there's a change in here that we need to look at. So future down the road, another version of this may suggest removal of this, or you'll see a section potentially struck out. There are some, generally you'll see code change proposal numbers along the side in comments. The couple exceptions you'll see there are some that are going to identify code correlation, which all that means is there wasn't a specific code change proposal from ICC that said change this section of code. It means potentially something changed to the building code that trickled down and affected the property maintenance code or the fire code, but it wasn't a specific proposal. So it's a little bit of a tracking mechanism for anyone who wants to go to those proposals and understand what happened. Let's see, I think that's the bulk of the things from the property maintenance code that you'll see. The other thing I wanted to point out is in the fuel gas code, ICC does do the fuel gas code a little bit different than their other books. It is combined standard and code. They take NFPA 54, which is a standard. It has a different process than ICC, and they automatically accept updates that are done to NFPA 54. And so there are actually not code change proposal numbers associated with a number of changes in the fuel gas code. So you will see in the fuel gas code, instead of a code change proposal number, you'll see an NFPA 54 number, section number, and it's basically identifying that this is the newest version of NFPA 54. This section was modified, and therefore it's modified in the fuel gas code. I guess the last thing I'll say is in the documents, as far as updates to reference standards, kind of to Keith's point, if it's a reference standard that we have already incorporated by reference into the code or has been previously included in an ICC code, it's not included in this document. The new date is not included in this document because the assumption is we've always, for example, NFPA 54, we've always incorporated, or the National Electric Code's always been incorporated. It's just the newer version, so it's not represented in this document. The only ones that are in this document are any reference standards that are new. So if somebody proposed a new reference standard that wasn't previously in ICC, that would be included in here. Same goes for appendices. If there are modifications to appendices that the New York State typically has not adopted, we did not show those modifications because New York State has typically not adopted those appendices. But if there were new ones, we did show the new ones in here as proposed at ICC to be a new appendix.
That's it. Thank you. I'm continually amazed at how much you keep in your head. You do a great job. Are there questions for Kevin on the uniform code? Okay. Hearing none, we're going to let Councilmember Cable take the screen, and he's going to give us a presentation on automatic fire suppression sprinkler systems.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to confirm that everybody can see the screen of the presentation.
New York and Buffalo, you can see the presentation?
All right.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you for this opportunity to discuss residential sprinkler systems and their proven potential to save lives and protect property as the Code Council moves to transition to the 2024 edition of the code. Fire safety in the United States has improved since 1980 with a significant reduction in the overall number of fires and fatalities. However, most of those reductions occurred prior to 2010. Since that time, the overall number of fires and fatalities has leveled off for the past decade, and fatalities have actually begun to creep up over the last several years. As the slide shows, the fires that do occur are becoming more deadly. With approximately 7 deaths per 1,000 fires in 1980, now 8 deaths per 1,000 fires in 2021. And notably, the rate of fire deaths in 1- and 2-family homes is 35% higher in 2021 than it was in 1980. Fire fatalities, the vast majority of fire fatalities occur in the home, and 64% specifically in 1- and 2-family homes. And those that are dying are those that are most at risk, the most vulnerable parts of our population. Nationally, 57% of fatal fire victims over a 5-year period were age 55 or older. And during that same 5-year period, 2,200 fatal fire victims had a physical disability. And of those that were disabled that died, 86% of those deaths occurred in 1- and 2-family homes. In New York, unfortunately, New York is consistently ranked among the top states in annual fire deaths. In 2021, nearly 50% of the state's fire deaths occurred in 1- and 2-family homes. As you can see in the slide, the Office of Fire Prevention and Control has tracked an average of 161 deaths over the previous 2 years. In 2021, 80 of those occurred in 1- and 2-family homes. And consistent with the national standards or national statistics, 64% of those fire victims were aged 55 and older. chart in the slide shows the rate of fatalities over the course of a year in New York State has remained consistent year after year. Additional action is necessary to change this equation. Background, as you may be aware, in 2009, the ICC adopted residential sprinkler requirements within the International Residential Code for new 1 to 2 family homes and townhomes. That established an effective date of January 2011. As of 2023, California, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. have adopted these requirements. And additionally, local municipalities, both in New York State and elsewhere, have adopted residential sprinkler requirements for new construction. Residential sprinkler systems provide proven life-saving protection. Sprinklers are the fastest option to put effective water on a fire to slow its growth, if not extinguish it, protecting both lives and property, and protecting both occupants and firefighters. Residential sprinklers are currently required in the New York State Code for all other new residential occupancies except 1 and 2 family homes and townhomes. Bottom line, residential sprinkler systems reduce the chance of dying or being injured in a fire in your home. When present, they reduce fire death and injury rates, and although primarily intended to provide for life safety, they've also been proven to significantly reduce property loss. A new risk, lithium-ion battery fires are a new and deadly fire problem. Recent UL testing has shown that residential sprinklers can limit the growth of lithium-ion battery fires. Look at the experience of other states. Combined between Maryland and California, out of over 1,000 reported home fires with sprinkler system activations, there was 1 reported fire death. That ratio of less than 1 death per 1,000 fires, again, compared to the national average of 8 deaths per 1,000 fires. Regarding property protection and reduced property damage, a 15-year study in Scottsdale, Arizona, which adopted sprinkler requirements for new residential construction in 1985, found that the fire damage caused to sprinklered homes was 1/10 of that of a working structure fire in a non-sprinkler protected home. And that stat is consistent in other areas that have adopted similar requirements. In addition to protecting occupants, sprinklers protect firefighters. By limiting a fire's growth, residential sprinklers reduce the threat it poses to firefighters. 81% of firefighter injuries occur at structure fires, but injury rates at fires where sprinklers are present are 78% lower compared to when they are not. Without sprinklers present, the fire continues to grow as firefighters respond, presenting them with a larger advanced fire condition and a more severely structurally compromised building upon arrival. Limiting the size of the fire also limits the amount of toxic materials produced, including known carcinogens, and reduces the time firefighters must be exposed to those threats, ultimately reducing their cancer risks. Occupational cancers are a leading cause of firefighter deaths. In 2022, firefighting as a profession was identified as a cause of cancer by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, only the second occupational group to be given this classification. Additional benefits: statistically less water required for fire suppression when sprinklers are present, approximately 10 times less than fires in unsprinkled homes. By controlling fires quickly, the amount of pollutants produced and discharged into the environment by a home fire is also significantly reduced. And insurance savings available can benefit homeowners and the entire community. Concerns expressed about residential sprinkler requirements frequently include cost of installation, an argument that new homes are safer than old homes, that they provide or create an increased potential for water damage, and that smoke alarms alone are sufficient to protect lives from fire. Concerns regarding potential negative impact upon new home construction have not been borne out in areas where residential sprinkler requirements were adopted, including areas such as Scottsdale, Arizona, and Bucks County, Pennsylvania. While many variables contribute to overall costs, average installation costs of 1% or less of the total cost of a home have been consistently reported where residential sprinkler requirements were adopted. Additional considerations. In 2007, the National Institute of Science and Technology conducted a study that looked at direct and indirect costs with respect to multi-purpose network sprinkler systems. A multi-purpose system leverages or uses a home's existing domestic water supply and is essentially the most economic option available for residential sprinklers. They found that failing to install sprinkler systems in residential dwellings is no longer supported on economic grounds. That study considered benefits including reduced risk of occupant death or injury, insurance savings, and reduced costs of uninsured direct and indirect property loss versus the cost of installation of such a system. As noted, some insurance companies provide benefits or discounts to homeowners, and over the course of time, those savings can accrue to offset the cost of installing a system. In addition to insurance savings, the IRC does provide design enhancements such as reduction in required fire flow, with a sprinklered home reducing fire flow to 500 gallons a minute versus 1,000 gallons per minute required for an unsprinklered home, increased hydrant spacing, and reduction in fire separations between two-family homes and townhomes, reducing that rating or allowing that rating to be reduced to 1 hour versus 2 hours if not sprinkled. Alternatives such as these, and there are others within the IRC, can reduce overall home construction costs and further offset the cost of sprinkler installation. New homes are safer. Home age directly is not directly connected to common fire causes, such as cooking, beating, or intentional acts. While actions by this council to improve the state's building codes have made homes safer overall, modern homes do pose new safety challenges, including increased risk of structural collapse and rapid fire spread. Structural collapse is directly related to the increased use of lightweight burning materials, and that's a risk specifically for firefighters with advanced fire conditions. And the open floor plans of many modern homes facilitate rapid fire spread, which can imperil both the occupants and then operating firefighters. Modern furnishings today versus the legacy furnishings of the past are increasingly hydrocarbon based. Those materials, when they burn, have high heat release rates. They accelerate the fire and limit an occupant's escape time. The fact is we have significantly less time to escape from a burning home today than we used to, 2 minutes or less. Today's new homes are tomorrow's old homes. Adopting these requirements now will protect more New Yorkers in the future. And again, although the number of fires and fire deaths have been reduced since 1980, in part because of improved building codes, those numbers have plateaued for the last decade, and additional action is required to reduce them further. Experience has shown that adopting residential sprinkler requirements in the IRC will do so. Regarding the potential for water damage, sprinkler systems do not activate simultaneously with smoke alarms. Movie and television portrayals of sprinkler activations are rarely accurate. Individual sprinkler heads are heat activated, so only those in proximity to the fire activate. They're not activated again by the smoke alarms and do not all activate simultaneously. In most fires, statistically only one sprinkler head activates, and the fire is contained to the room of origin 97% of the time, minimizing both fire and water damage. Fire department operations require far more water to suppress a working fire than the early intervention of a sprinkler system. When properly installed, the risk of accidental damage from water leaks is comparable to indoor plumbing. Sprinkler systems reliably protect high-value commercial and industrial facilities and high-occupancy residential apartments and hotels, and will do so for our homes. Smoke alarms do provide critical early warning to home occupants, but only a residential sprinkler system will actually slow a fire's growth and provide time for occupants to escape. This protection is most important for those who are most vulnerable: very young, the disabled, and the elderly. Ultimately, combining the protection of smoke alarms and sprinklers is essential to reducing fire fatalities. Adopting the IRC's residential sprinkler requirements for 1 and 2 family homes and townhomes is a step this council can take that will save lives and protect property. Thank you, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jim. Definitely a powerful presentation, one that State Fire Administrator and the Commissioner of Homeland Security gave to me about a couple months ago. There are a lot of very powerful statistics in that presentation that you just gave. The one that jumps out to me the strongest is probably 2.5 minutes, or about 2 minutes to get out. When I hear that number, I remember I wasn't the chair of this council in 2015, but I remember the discussion, and I remember that number being much closer to 8 minutes. So that tells you that fires are burning hotter with lighter weight materials and becoming just frankly more dangerous. So when I think of 2.5 minutes, I think of my 2 daughters and getting them out of the house in 2.5 minutes. And then I think about as Jim pointed out, the elderly, the disabled, and the very young, who will all have trouble getting out of a two-story structure for sure in 2 months. Then we talk about danger to firefighters. They showed me a burn box presentation from South Carolina, took place about 2-3 months ago on video. They had 2 side-by-side rooms, one was sprinklered, one was not, and the right side was sprinklered, it was survival. In fact, they started the fire in a waste paper basket, and it was out on the sprinklered side well within the 2 minutes. Not that that's going to happen in every case, but it's certainly a strong reason for action. The one on the left, we had OFPC here at the Department of State from 2007 to 2010 when I was here, so I spent a lot of time with them. I don't think to this day I realized how quickly things are burning and how fast firefighters need to react even to save lives, never mind to save the building. So, I mean, frankly, I'm convinced that it is the time for action by this council. But obviously, I want to open it up and see if folks have questions for Jim or if they have statements of their own to make. Who would like to speak? Only the councils.
I'm Tim Ball, Director of New York State Chiefs. We support.
I have to actually have some.
I'm sorry.
It's not public comment time, so
Very good.
I need to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from the council who would like to speak? I'm sorry, I should have been clear. Robert.
Would be helpful if we got a copy of the presentation and any of the documents and information backing up the stats to help us understand. Looking at stats on paper, one thing, but having a background understanding of the specifics so we can maybe potentially ask some questions would be very helpful.
Absolutely. So we'll get you the copy of the presentation, we'll get you all the backup that goes with it. I myself went through all of their citations and even found some myself, and they're solid sources.
That would be helpful.
Anyone else? Joe.
Just, obviously I come from the same background. In tracking, looking at some of the draft documents, it was nice to see with the lithium-ion batteries. That, I'm not sure people realize, is a major catastrophe waiting. New York City this year has already surpassed last year's fire fatalities related to lithium-ion batteries. They lost 4 more people this past week, and possibly 2 more that are in critical condition from a lithium-ion battery fire. And you can't just put them out. Unfortunately, I had to tell one of my developers who's building, putting charging stations underneath, if an electric car catches fire, I can't guarantee we're gonna put it out because of the amount of water that's needed. So, anything we can do to make things safer.
And uptake on lithium-ion batteries, Jim, help me, was in the 4-digit percentage increase over the next.
Yeah, and a lot of them are related to mobility devices, and it's relevant for a variety of reasons, but one of them is their personal use devices. So certainly one of the issues in New York City is the folks keep them in their home, in or near their home or in their entryway. And when the batteries fail, which can happen for a variety of reasons, mechanical damage, overcharge, misuse, modification, now we have a rapidly developing fire, extremely rapidly developing fire that's in the exit pathway. And that has resulted in or contributed to the fatality which occurred in New York City. The recent testing by UL, and the report is used UL later this summer, showed that the early intervention of a residential sprinkler system can limit or slow fire growth in that kind of scenario. So they provide the same level of protection or that early intervention, the ability to operate as they are here in this room. They're ready to operate if need be, far quicker than a fire department, and they're activating and operating why those fires, any fire, but specifically lithium-ion battery fires, are so small.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, Mike?
Sure. 2 things. So first, so it's a little, I don't know how to start laying this on paper, but right, to go from 8 minutes to 4 minutes to 2 minutes on anything is obviously okay. So something has driven that. So so I just want to be clear, like in addition, not as a substitution, but like whether there were other actions that should be considered or recommendations that, to address the, whatever's driving that reduction from 8 minutes to 2.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's driven by a variety of factors, and some are just the realities of modern living. That increasingly, what we have, what we own, what we sit on, what we wear is made of synthetic materials. And decades ago, that wasn't the case. It was natural materials, it was cottons, it was natural fibers, it was wood. And there are videos available online. We can provide them for the council's consideration if they like, that shows the fire development and the amount of time that it took for a couch, right, stuffed with natural materials made of wood, with a cotton covering to start a fire, and the amount of time that takes. And that can be much longer than 8 minutes. It's not a very exciting video just to watch in real time. Versus modern furnishings today, where because there's synthetics, they're hydrocarbons, the same things that we fuel our cars with, essentially are the base. Very high rapid heat release rate, rapid fire extension throughout the building. And modern homes, we like open floor plans, right? We don't have the compartmentation of older buildings, which are typically smaller. So, with benefit, with progress, has come some challenges. Now, I will say that clearly the code has made a difference. New building codes, better fire safety education practices, that's what's driven down fires, the number of fires and fatalities to where it is today. But it has hit that plateau. And I would advocate and am advocating, consistent with the responsibilities of my position, that in order to protect the people of the state of New York, we have to.
Sorry, now I have a third question, even though I think it's the second question. But is part of the 8 minutes to 2 minutes, is it strictly the fire, the heat and the spread of the fire? Or because you're mixing synthetic materials, is some of it, you only have 2 minutes because of the chemicals being,
No, I mean, it's primarily, smoke is what kills most folks in fires, right, rather than being burned to death. So smoke is definitely a consideration of toxic materials that are reduced. But as far as the speed of fire development and to get out, it's both the amount of heat and smoke that's produced by the fire and the rate at which it's produced. So if you're upstairs and a fire develops downstairs and you have limited warning and there's nothing to stop that fire's growth, it's going to give you less of a chance of getting outside that fire building. Again, just pointing out the safety of firefighters in the equation, because typically, traditionally, when we've had these discussions, it's focused on occupant safety, rightly so, but the safety of firefighters is also part of that. Smoke alarms, for example, if they provide us warning and we get out, that's great, but Joe and his peers, my peers, are going to be responding to search that fire building to make sure there's nobody in it, locate, confine, extinguish the fire, protect property, that's our charge. That fire continues, that growth continues unabated without the presence of a sprinkler system. So to answer your question directly, it's both, right? It's the smoke that's produced by the amount of a fire, and it's the amount of heat and the rate at which it's produced. Sprinkler systems limit both.
And then, I promise this is my last question. So I'm professing my ignorance about sprinklers, unfortunately. Is there maintenance that needs to occur, or do they need to be replaced periodically? And I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that's a reason not to do it, but whether there's some homeowner education that would need to occur in conjunction with that.
No, maintenance is a legitimate concern because we have to know that they're reliable and they're going to operate when they need it. The systems that we're talking about for 1 and 2 family homes required by the RIC are NFPA 13D, and that is essentially a compromise, for lack of a better word, versus the systems that are in this building or the systems that are in an apartment or a hotel. They focus specifically on the occupied areas of the structure, the living areas of a structure, because their primary intent is to provide the occupants time to escape. They're designed to operate with only 2 sprinkler heads, right, 50 gallons a minute, give or take, for 10 minutes. So they have a limited operational objective, right, a limited goal. They're focused just on those living areas. But because of that, they require very little maintenance. Right? It's a simple system. It's a mechanical system. Technology itself has been around for 150 years. Sprinklers are not.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Are there annual certifications, like on a commercial establishment? You have to be, at least in our community, you have to be certified. The sprinkler system has to be certified every year. Is there a requirement that the homeowner have these sprinkler systems certified every year?
So according to NFPA 13D, it's not the same requirements. I'm getting a little outside my expertise on what local municipalities may require as far as that. But the systems themselves require very little maintenance. And in a multi-purpose system, which I mentioned before, as opposed to a system that has dedicated sprinkler piping and water supply for the sprinkler system, it comes off the domestic water supply. So that does a couple different things. The water's coming out of your sink, you've got water to the sprinkler heads.
So you mentioned only in living areas, where people are, so basements and attics will not be required?
Not unless it's furnished, but typically unfurnished places don't require it. Garages, if I'm correct, don't require it, right? It's a compromise. And because it's separation between the living area and the garage.
And the
that's a
purpose is
compromise
they get
between
people out, not to.
Correct.
I got you.
Correct.
Thanks, Mayor. Tim?
Yes, I sit on the council as a representative of professional engineering. So I have 40 years' experience and I'm a registered fire protection engineer. Have been doing this for a long time. This technology is so simple and so easy to understand. All of the different discussions that we've heard, the technology's been around for a long time. All of the building codes we're talking about is adopting new technology to allow new things in our lives to become into benefits for people. So it's been around, it's proven, it's simple, it's not ridiculous to go on to the additional provisions in 1 and 2 family homes and townhouses. It's not a special piping, layout, all sorts of pumps, listings. It's almost like a plumbing system. As a matter of fact, the residential code has a section about what to do if we didn't want to follow NFPA 13D. So I'm very much in favor of this. It's use of technology that's there. I've been in the fire service for almost 50 years. I've seen the difference between back in the 70s to today. It is absolutely different. And we have technology available and we should use that, just as the ICC has shown that it's available. All of the other states and areas that have used it have had very, very high success rates. It deals with the problem. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I have a hard time believing you're that old, but okay.
Pretty good for 85, huh?
This is what I'm saying. All right, who else? Claudia. I look left and say right.
This sounds like a smart idea, simple solution, hopefully not too costly for homeowners, because we heard that concern in other contexts. I would like to hear from the public, and also wondering if we can put the presentation up and maybe bring this back.
I think that's appropriate, right, Jim? Sure. I mean, Jim gave it in public, so it should be up to the public to take a look as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to say I'm not old. But the last go around, we debated this at great length. To me, the only big critical item is cost, and cost. On my side of the plate as an architect and designer, that entry point for homeowners and now being prescriptive regarding sprinkler system, to me, has been the biggest hurdle in making the decision. The technology is there, the technology is not a problem. It's a simple technology and there's been modifications. So to the extent that, I know you had one slide that spoke to that cost, but more information or various information, I think that was a hang up as to really what was the cost for systems in the 1 and 2 family, because we would, by this board making that decision, will be removing another option that a homeowner would have in their residence.
Yeah, I mean, I'll offer that. It's a legitimate concern. I hear the concern, right? And obviously consideration. And I think anytime we look at the cost or the investment in something, we have to look at the benefit that's provided. I think the life safety benefits are clear. But economically, the studies or the experience of either communities that have adopted this requirement within their building code, such as Scottsdale, Arizona is one of the leaders, and the states that have done so, that information is out there. And I think over time, if you take into consideration the benefits that accrue, the protection that's provided, offset by in all of those accounts, it's pretty consistent. The damage is 10 times less. 10% of the damage, should a fire actually occur, that is controlled when a sprinkler system is present, can activate on fire, the damage is 10 times less. So it's 10 times greater, plus the risk to the occupants, plus the risk to the firefighters. And then the costs to do that, to replace those homes, to replace the belongings in those homes, assuming everybody gets out. As an active volunteer firefighter, I have responded to calls with all the challenges of today's volunteer fire service, and we have made an aggressive interior attack and a good stop on a fire, and at the end of the day, it's an insurance check, right? Even though we made a great stop, controlled the extension of the fire from throughout that home, just cost-wise, the entire home leveled and rebuilt, right? So the cost that's there to the homeowner, to the community, to the insurance industry, versus having sprinkler protection present in the room to activate literally within, a minute. Once that temperature reaches 125 to 165 degrees, the fusible links in those sprinkler heads are activating, and there's effective water on the fire when it's smallest and when it can be controlled best, on top of all the protections. So to focus just on costs, it can be a pretty alarming number and you can pause. But I think, just like buying a car, is it worth what I'm putting into it? You have to consider that.
Thanks. I don't know if it's as alarming a cost as I think has been presented to this council in the past. I think Jim had a slide there.
Yeah, the 1%. The 1% is consistent, right? Even with the change in costs and inflation, that 1% in the areas where these requirements were adopted because of efficiencies, because of the requirements being across the community, that 1% is pretty consistent.
So we did do a decent amount of research over the last couple of months, and it looks like in the worst case scenario, so no municipal water, the need for a pump and a tank. You're slightly in excess of about $5 per square, and that comes down significantly when you're back on municipal water. The average, this is an interesting statistic. I checked it and double checked it actually because I didn't believe it when I saw it. The average home being built in New York today is 1,640 square feet. That shocked me. I assumed it would be 2,500, honestly. So we can start to run numbers about what we're talking about off of either the 1% from the home or the numbers that I just threw out there. Both are consistent, pretty generally, even though there's a range there. So
will that be sent with the backup that you're sending out that Robert requested?
Yeah, we can include the studies, again, Bucks County, Prince George's County, which had adopted it, and Maryland had adopted one before the statewide requirement. Those numbers are in there, damage numbers, comparison numbers. I'll also offer that the places that put in the residential sprinkler requirements were adopted within the code. They also note, Bucks County's report in particular, we did not note a reduction in building permits that were issued. In fact, they were some of the highest in the history of those areas after the requirement was adopted.
Bucks County, Maryland?
No, Bucks County, Pennsylvania. It was Prince George's County, Maryland, that mentioned the other study. We can provide both of those.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the state of California has a lot of good information of what happened when they did that, and they were very successful and supports a lot of that same information that we're just discussing right now.
generally the lowest numbers are coming out of California per square foot. Okay, this has been a hot conversation in Albany, Buffalo, or New York City. Looks like.
Thank you, Buffalo. Hi, how are you? So I always get a little wary when I see a bunch of statistics presented to me that apparently someone has reached a conclusion and then they put statistics up that support that conclusion, instead of a bunch of information that shows both sides, benefits and liabilities and weighs and balances, and reaches a conclusion then. So everything I've seen in this presentation has already decided the outcome and then provides information in support of that conclusion. My concern has been a number of things, and there were some slides that had titles but didn't provide any backup that talked about old homes versus new homes. And I am concerned that New York, as a colonial state, has a lot of really old homes in it, and there's never a statistic that's presented that shows where these fire deaths are actually occurring. Are they occurring in new construction, or are they occurring in existing older homes? And I will agree that when technology becomes widespread, it tends to become cheaper, but it has to become widespread. We have 7 million structures in New York State. We build 40,000 new dwelling units a year. That's all. The governor has a housing compact that talks about our crisis in supply and our crisis in affordability, which is why I talked a little earlier this morning about costs. It wasn't costs for the investor. It's the cost that gets passed on to the consumer. And we're pricing new construction out of the market and keeping people in older, what may be, if the statistics bear it out, less safe places. And I think that the costs will not become cheaper and widespread. We do not build like they build in Maryland and suburban DC and in California. We build 40,000 structures a year. Costs do not come down. And I can tell you, if you price out what it costs to put a sprinkler system in a new home, it's not $1.35 per square foot, not even close. And so that's a real issue. And if it's cost, and you want to take the attitude that every life is precious, and there's no cost that we shouldn't spend to save a life, then maybe the code should be considered to put these systems in every house, every structure, because only people that can afford new houses shouldn't be the ones worthy of saving. Everyone should be worthy of saving if that's your benchmark and the basis for your decision making. And so I think there needs to be some consideration for these things. And other statistics, I saw a presentation by some architects at one presentation a few years ago where they talked about fire deaths in dwellings, in residential dwellings, and why we've seen the decline that were cited a little earlier as having plateaued. And they said the number one statistic on that wasn't a change in building codes. It was smoking rates. So that as people stopped smoking and falling asleep in bed with a cigarette in their hand, fire deaths started to decline. We don't see any statistics like that draw other correlations and try to reach other conclusions and make an educated comparison and reach an educated conclusion. We just have decided this is the way we should go and this is what we're going to spend money on and disincentivize people moving into new houses that the reason we're here passing codes is to make them safer. And we're going to keep people from moving into newer, safer homes, and we're going to keep them in older, less expensive homes in a state that already is too expensive to build in. I'm not suggesting that's the only reason, and the cost shouldn't be considered as we're trying to do these things. But it certainly should be a factor that other people are worthy, and we shouldn't be disincentivizing and keeping people from moving into safer environments because we just keep on raising the cost of what it takes to build something new. I noted that, we talked about statistics where the places that are having these new codes put in place, they have had zero fire deaths in houses that were protected with sprinklers, not in what's the rate of new construction unprotected, what's compared to old houses that are unprotected. None of those statistics are presented. Just simply, it's great if you've got a new house with a sprinkler, nobody's dying in those places. And in all of these states, which there are two, California and Maryland, and the District of Columbia is another city added to that mix, which is essentially Maryland. So again, we can't just, I can't say we. For me, I don't like running down a road with an incomplete set of facts or a set of facts that only have reached the conclusion already and then support that conclusion. I would rather we do a real detailed study and find out where are people actually dying in fires in the state of New York. What's the average age of a house? There's 7 million structures and we're building 40,000 a year. It's going to take us a long time to get to 7 million and save everybody if we're going to do it on replacement theory. So I think this bears more investigation, quite frankly. At least I think so. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Sure.
Bill, I hear your concerns, and frankly, I welcome look at data and a data-driven process. That what I attempted to offer today is the data that's been out there and the experience of areas that have adopted residential sprinkler protection for 1 and 2 family homes and townhomes. As noted in an earlier slide, the Office of Fire Prevention and Control, we're tracking fire fatalities in the state, and that's not just simply keeping track of the numbers. That's looking at reaching out to those localities that have suffered a fire fatality to find out information about the age of the home, condition of the home, presence of sprinklers, smoke alarms, information about the victim, so we can identify what we don't know, both to confirm what we do know, that it's the very old that most often die, and they die at home, and also identify what we don't know so we can begin to address those issues. So we're beginning, and we've started to gather some of the information that you're seeking, so I welcome your interest in that process.
Excellent.
I will say too, with the $1.35 cost, as on the slide there, it is a 2013 report, it is a dated report, but highlighting that 1%. Scottsdale, Arizona found 1%. The NFPA found 1%. That's been a consistent benchmark 1% or less of the cost where these systems were adopted.
So I have a question. I don't have a personal take, and I try to remove that because I think it's important for the code council to look at the facts and study things on the basis, and often you have to make a decision that goes against your personal beliefs. Because we're all affected. We're all affected by certain situations that come up. Obviously, my first time on this code council, I think this has been an important topic because it hasn't been adopted for a long time. So there must be back information what has caused this, and things change and technology grows. But the more information we have from both sides is very helpful, so we make an educated decision going on. Not sitting here certain I want to see anyone perish, nor do I want firemen to be hurt. I have family members that are in that, but police officers, I get it, I understand it. The important issue is understanding the cost ramifications to New York State alone. It's very difficult to compare New York State to any other place. The cost is significantly different in a lot of areas, and the impact on a lot of the rural areas. New York State is very unique, as we all know, in that down county versus up county is two different worlds. It could be like two different states. Once you adopt this code, it becomes for everyone. And I think that's important. What I'm asking is it possible, because there are municipalities throughout New York State that have more restrictive codes on the fire sprinkler system, to get information from them based on the backstory to see how that has impacted them with the fire sprinkler system that have implemented in their counties and their cities and towns versus states that may be completely different from New York State. You know, I understand we use that. We have the international code. We're trying to get uniformed. I understand it, but each state does have to look at it from their history and their inventory and their goals and how we have to tweak things, which is why I really do prefer that New York has this standalone code, because we have such uniqueness and an ability to look at a longer history compared to other different states. So any information we could get based on states, cities, and municipalities that have that background would be great. From a cost factor, from what's their impact? How has it impacted them in the 10 years, 5 years, 20 years that they might have had it? If that's possible to get.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, this election is limited because the only states where they've been adopted statewide are the ones that they weren't picked. That's what we had to choose from to offer that up. But there are local level reports for the county or municipal level, and I'll provide those. They were factored in reference to. So where it's available, I'm happy to.
Like I said, just the more information, the better. Help educate us to make a good decision, one way or the other.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robert. Anyone else? Okay. What time is it, Kevin? It's 11:35. This probably is a good spot to take a break for 15 to 20 minutes before we get into public comment so that everyone's fresh going into that. So why don't we take a recess? We'll come back with 11:35, right? Why don't we come back at 11:50 and hopefully we're going before noon. How about that? So with that, we stand in recess.
On the record.
Thank you so much. Okay, I hope everybody got some sustenance. We are moving to the public comment period, which is agenda item 5. So I'd like to begin by thanking those of you who are here today to address the council as we move towards the adoption of the 2024 Uniform and Energy Codes. As I noted earlier, we have more than 50, and we may be climbing towards 60 now, people wishing to address the council today. I want to make sure we give everybody an equal opportunity to do so. So we are going to limit everybody to 3 minutes so that we have attention both at the beginning and at the end of the comment period. Kevin's going to be calling names. We're going to try and do people in this room, New York City, and then WebEx. Generally, that's what we're going to be doing. So Kevin's going to call names, and then he's going to also say who's on deck so that we can cycle through this with some expediency and efficiency. Again, I'll let you know, I'll raise my hand, or I'll say 15 seconds as you're coming towards the end so that you can wrap up your remarks. Okay, Kevin, I believe we have Assemblywoman Gallagher.
Yes, I will unmute you now. You should be unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Okay, I am Assembly Member Emily Gallagher, and I am here to urge the Building Code Council to pay fastidious attention to the new climate laws and the codes necessary to make them a reality. I'm glad to hear that the council was discussing the changes required and how to integrate them into the regulatory process, including the needs of building electrification as detailed in the All Electric Buildings Act, which was included in this year's budget. I have been concerned that over the past year, the versions of building codes released did not allude to or include the new climate laws overall. As a reminder, the Code Council must give evidence that the building codes will not interfere with the emission reduction goals of our Climate Act, which is state law. The ABCA requires the Building Codes Council to incorporate the CAC recommendations to the fullest extent feasible, not just review them. Anything that is not included must be referenced in a clear public document that defends the decision and creates a plan for adoption in the future. The Building Codes Council must take Climate Action Council recommendations into the building code. The most recent scoping plan said new construction starting in 2025 should be electrified, energy efficient, and resilient. The building code must include energy storage and/or on-site renewable energy generation, as well as strong airtight envelopes for efficiency. This is what will be required to be considered energy efficient and resilient. The 2021 scoping plan insists that disadvantaged communities be included in the code's plan, with detailed reporting about how these concerns will be addressed in the building codes. I'll remind you that in 2021, the Building Codes Council themselves, or maybe not you guys, but the building codes themselves were listed as a barrier to decarbonization. I urge the council to create a report that talks about the barriers of decarbonization of disadvantaged communities. The council has an obligation and a duty that what the division is submitting to you is adjusted to the Climate Action Code Council, or the Climate Action Council Code, and it should be done clearly and publicly with clear, detailed answers. This is something we rely on you for, and anything less would be negligent to your duties as a member. I have great faith that the Codes Council will hold the standards accountable to our climate goals, and that you will do all that you can to make sure that we are updated completely, comprehensively, and publicly. It is vital to our future, not just in compliance with state law, but to slow the onset of the climate crisis in total. Thank you very much. That concludes my comment.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. We appreciate your comments. Okay, Kevin.
Okay, so then we're gonna run down people in the Albany office. So first I have Aaron Sherman, followed by Jody Smith Anderson.
Where's best to stand so folks can hear? This is okay? All right. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to comment. I think this is a hugely exciting moment for the council. I hope you all feel that way as well. My name is Aaron Sherman, and I belong to RMI, an independent nonprofit founded in 1982 that transforms global energy systems through market-driven solutions to secure a clean, prosperous, zero-carbon future for all. I personally grew up about half an hour from here in a brick house built in 1954 with oil heat. And I'm joining many others here today to implore the Building Code Council to swiftly and completely execute the mandate of the All Electric Buildings Act, signed into law earlier this year. In particular, we urge the council to adopt all electric new construction requirements on time, with minimal exceptions or loopholes, permitting fossil fuel use only for the limited purposes that are truly infeasible to accomplish with electricity, and requiring robust electrification readiness measures in buildings that obtain exceptions for limited fossil fuel use. Requiring all electric new construction will protect occupants' health, finances, and the global climate that all of us depend on. First, all electric new buildings will eliminate combustion inside homes and workplaces, which creates health-harming pollutants like nitrogen oxides and PM2.5, the same particles from Canadian wildfires that made your eyes and throats burn just a few weeks ago, and mine too, a little bit further south from here. The New York chapters of both the American Lung Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics endorsed the All Electric Buildings Act, citing peer-reviewed research that these pollutants disproportionately harm the health of children, those with chronic respiratory conditions, older adults, and people of color. Second, all electric new buildings are a good deal. many buildings are less costly to build all electric since they only require one central HVAC appliance and no gas or oil plumbing, which means upside for design and construction professionals. One study completed before the Inflation Reduction Act's new tax incentives suggests first cost savings of up to $8,200 on an all-electric single-family home in New York State's Climate Zone 5A, which covers the Capital District and the Buffalo, Rochester, and Syracuse metro areas. Finally, there's a cost to delay. Just in the time between now and December 31st, 2025, over 40,000 new fossil fuel heated homes will be permitted in parts of New York that have not independently committed to all-electric new construction. All of those homes will have to be electrified at higher costs down the road to meet the broader goals of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. Fortunately, all-electric new buildings will not only eliminate emissions within their own walls, they will also shift the broader construction and HVAC markets to better meet the pressing need to decarbonize our existing homes and workplaces. This is an urgently needed step in the right direction.
15 seconds.
The All Electric Buildings Act, as Penny quoted earlier, has a very clear mandate for this council. RMI looks forward to the prompt and comprehensive implementation of this mandate by this body and stands ready to assist. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Jody Smith Anderson, followed by Jacob King.
Hi, just correction, it's Jody Smits Anderson. I'd like to introduce myself first and then I have 3 comments. I'm an architect, a LEED accredited professional in building design and construction, a well-accredited professional, a regenerative practitioner, and I have been made a fellow of the American Institute of Architecture for my service to and advancement of the profession. I have 15 years experience with policy implementations in New York State, including greening state entity operations, procurement, and building operations and design. I have served on the staff team for scoping under Energy Efficiency and Housing Working Group for the New York State Climate Law. I am also an industry expert speaking nationally and engaged with the U.S. Green Building Council, International Living Future Institute, and NESI, to name a few leading-edge building industry organizations. I have taught the Commercial Energy Code for the state of New York to over 750 owners, architects, engineers, and building officials over the last 2 code cycles. My 3 points. 1, the Energy Conservation and Construction Code of New York State is about 3 years behind the International Code, which has been mentioned, which itself lags about 3 years behind ASHRAE 90.1. That's the standard that informs the code. Yes, this is improving. However, with this in mind, this code will be 6 years behind our needs on the day of its adoption. We have known for at least a dozen years, ever since the development of the first Climate Action Plan in New York State in 2010, that electrification is a significant part of the answer regarding climate action. 2, change is always hard. What makes it easier is clear government mandates. Yes, many will hate the update to full electrification because change is hard. And very honestly, many don't yet know the tremendous health, comfort, equity, and cost benefits of building electrification. Many will try to induct the requirements out of habit, but including electrification into the New York State Energy Code will actually make this transition easier for architects, owners, and builders. Yes, we need to figure out a lot of the how, but we won't unless figuring out is required by the law of the Energy Code. The climate law, a nationally admired law and goal set, exists, and I implore you not to create confusion by not supporting that law in codified processes. Speaking of confusion, Energy Code applies to additions, most renovations, and when a full system is replaced, so the language cited earlier about exempting additions and change of occupancy will also create confusion. The weightiest comment. We are in climate peril. With, for example, climate relocations already occurring in the USA. We need to own this current peril and do the needed work. We are currently not doing enough in any sector of this state, even though, at least in goal setting, we are leading the nation. Our climate law has given me hope. We have tremendous capacity and capability to do better work in creating and renovating homes, transportation, manufacturing, hospitals, educational facilities, commercial spaces, food services and systems, and more. Architecture and engineering affects all of these directly, and you have the ability to clearly inform and activate this industry, set the floor appropriately high, and ensure we electrify all future buildings.
Thank you so much.
Jacob King, followed by Isaac Silverman Gorn.
All right. Greetings, friends and those online. My name is Jacob King. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm advocating for all electric building measures. I reside in the Sheridan Hollow neighborhood, the largest BIPOC and AAPI community within the city of Albany. I live in an all-electric apartment building which utilizes geothermal energy, heat pumps, and all-electric appliances. However, I am cognizant my white cisgender male privilege affords me the ability to be in my apartment. Nearly all Sheridan Hollow residences are powered by fossil fuels, including appliances. Studies have shown gas stoves in particular are hazardous to quality of life. Stealing the breath of life from community color is an ongoing reality for my Sheridan Hollow neighbors. The Sheridan Hollow Energy Facility, for example, powers the state capitol by redirecting energy from the impoverished neighborhood while simultaneously emitting toxins into the local atmosphere. There are glimmers of hope in the midst of this ongoing injustice. The Assembly majority recently declared unequivocally Black Lives Matter, indicating a positive redirection of governance. Our state's Constitution's Green Amendment and human rights law both support the inherent right to a quality of life and a clean, healthy environment. Currently, an engineering firm is also studying transitioning Sheridan Hollow residences to geothermal energy and all-electric power. I urge this committee to require buildings being built be electrified in accordance with the new law, but please don't forget marginalized folks. Support existing buildings transition to allow all electric as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Isaac Silverman Gorn, followed by Michael Hernandez.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Isaac Silverman Gorn. I live in the city of Troy. I'm an organizer with FRAC Action. As you all know, in 2019, we passed one of the most ambitious climate laws in the country, and just passed all-electric new construction. It's fantastic that the Codes Council will be developing new codes in alignment with the All-Electric Buildings Act. We appreciate the acknowledgement of aligning new codes with the CAC recommendations as well. We now need to carry forward and do that. Buildings are the single most significant contributor to climate impacting emissions in New York, with lowest income New Yorkers paying the price of adverse health impacts from pollution and suffering from the effects of extreme weather. There is political will for these changes that are required as New York has continued to pass critical legislation to ensure that the CLCPA is properly implemented, including Advanced Codes Appliance and Equipment Standards Act and the All-Electric Buildings Act. We thank the Council for enabling and encouraging moving our homes and buildings off of fossil fuels as soon as possible for our health, well-being, an equitable and just future for all New Yorkers. I do want to say I came in not expecting to be sold on sprinkler systems. It's a common sense thing that can save lives. People thought seatbelts, a common sense thing that can save lives. We have an electric solution to protect our health, protect the climate, in heat pumps and insulating our buildings. And any opposition to that is nonsensical, self-serving, cynical, and destructive. Have a good day.
Thank you for your comments.
Michael Hernandez, followed by Lisa Marshall.
Hello, I'm Michael Hernandez, New York Policy Director for Rewiring America. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of New York and California. Rewiring America is a nonprofit electrification advocacy organization. As you know, New York State law requires that the Building Code Council members periodically update the building code to reflect the laws that have been enacted since the last building code. Since the last building code, we've enacted 3 laws that address the decarbonization of the building sector. The very purpose of the council was changed through the amendment mentioned earlier to the law enacted just 2 months ago. The updated purpose of the council is to recognize that decarbonization of new and existing buildings is closely related to the state's clean energy and climate agenda, and that the Uniform Code shall enable the state's clean energy objectives. That was just enacted into law 2 months ago. Article 18 of the executive law provides members of the council with the power to subpoena witnesses, to take testimony, to compel production of books and records, one or more members of the council can hold public hearings and report the findings to the council. As members, your power and purpose is to ask the questions, to investigate. You have an oversight role over the division in creation of this update. We working on behalf, it's like a board of directors. You're like a board of directors working on behalf of the people of the state of New York. Don't give undeserved deference, especially in face of public outcry. Council members, the draft updates that the Division of Codes and Standards have made public to date for the 2024 Building Code update have not complied with All Electric Buildings Act or the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act or the Climate Law. The Climate Act requires the council members to determine if the 2024 Building Code update will interfere with the attainment of the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. The building sector is the single greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. The Climate Act also required the publication of a Barriers and Opportunities report for disadvantaged communities, which identified the barriers to decarbonization in disadvantaged communities. That report specifically found that the building code was a barrier and an opportunity to decarbonize disadvantaged communities. Council members, please request that division staff specifically break down the requirements of each law for the code council members and explain how the code updates comply with these laws. This should be done in public at a code council meeting so the public can understand. Please, council members, do not vote to approve a 2024 building code update until you are sure that these vital laws are being incorporated into that update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Lisa Marshall, followed by Danielle Moonley? Manley?
Thank you, and I'd like to say +1 to all the previous commenters. My name is Lisa Marshall. I am the Director of Advocacy and Organizing for New Yorkers for Clean Power. We are a nonprofit campaign. And previous to that, I was the Director of Heat Smart Tompkins, where I helped, I worked with municipalities, building contractors, HVAC contractors, homeowners, building owners to help implement heat pump adoption and other energy efficiency measures. Including in the gas-constrained town of Lansing, New York, where we did not have access to gas. So I want to just make a few points. The recommendations of the Climate Action Council were actually to start all electric buildings at the end of this year. That was pushed back in deference to this body's work and your timeline. So it's not pushed back because of climate reasons or building permitting reasons. It's pushed back actually to align with you so that we could work together, so that you could work with other state agencies implementing the Climate Act along the timeline that your council works. So I just wanted to point that out. Last year, a little over a year ago, the governor signed the Codes and Standards Law. It has a longer name. And that was specifically, one of the pieces of that law was to actually appoint a member of DEC and a member of NYSERDA to this body to help advise you with the next building energy code. I don't know why that hasn't been done, but it doesn't mean that you can't reach out to NYSERDA and DC and to help that alignment take place. And I wonder why the governor has not done that appointment. So in Tompkins County, and Climate Zone 5, there are actually a lot of all-electric buildings already built, all different kinds of buildings, from luxury housing, large multi-purpose buildings, grocery stores, airport terminals, luxury hotels, low-income housing, et cetera, and people happily living in safe, comfortable, affordable, all-electric buildings. In 2 parts of the state, we have gas constraints, southern Westchester and Lansing, and there are more and more gas constrained areas where more suddenly than this, unfortunately, builders, contractors, et cetera, had to adjust to a gas-free world. And I would just recommend that they not wait for this code to come into place, that they start to make that plan now. I have a specific request from one of the heat pump contractors that I work closely with, who's an electrician, from the, and you might wanna write this down, from the NEC code, there's a provision that you should adopt that would allow smart panels, so that a retrofitted house wouldn't have to update to 200 amps or more to accommodate all electric appliances and heating, but rather could stay maybe at 100 amps with a smart panel. And can I just say those numbers and then conclude on that? But this is for another person, so I should really get extra time. So it's adopt 220.70, amend part 750.30C and 750.30D in the 2023 NEC code. I just want to
I actually have
conclude.
to ask you to stop.
Sorry?
I have to ask you to stop that. You're well beyond the 3 minutes.
Okay, I just want to conclude by saying that in terms of fire safety, that cooking and heating equipment are the #1 cause of fires in New York State buildings. And building new buildings and retrofitting old buildings with heat pumps and safe, efficient induction stoves is actually going to really help with that safety component. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Danielle Manley, followed by Tim Bowl.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Danielle Manley. I'm the policy manager at Urban Green Council. We're a nonprofit based in New York City with a mission to decarbonize buildings for healthy and communities. A core area of our work at Urban Green actually includes worker training, and since 2010, we've trained over 14,000 design and building professionals on the state's energy code, on how to understand and comply with the code, and that includes architects, HVAC technicians, electricians, and many other industry professionals. Jody, who just spoke before, is actually one of our brilliant professors. And Urban Green also has a long track record of driving policy with data and practical solutions for buildings in New York. We helped shape some of our landmark regulations that affect building energy use and carbon, like Local 997, benchmarking requirements, and phasing in all electric construction. And so today is the start of a long process to develop the New York State Energy Code. A lot's happened in New York and around the country since 2020 that has transformed and elevated the role for buildings in the fight against climate change. And as we've heard already, buildings are the #1 source of carbon emissions in the state. And because of that, they play a central role in the state's scoping plan to meet climate targets. I think you all know it's pretty unusual to have this much attention at a code council meeting, and I think that's because everybody here is really excited to engage in this process because of the unique role that the code council will play in meeting the state's climate targets. The next iteration of the code that you develop will be what puts us on the path towards meeting those targets. And so some of the revisions that we're already seeing in the draft here today are making the code clearer and easier for professionals to use and easier for us to teach compared to previous versions of the code. And we're also really excited for the revisions that explicitly enable the state's energy code to be designed for not only the conservation of energy, but for the purpose of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so to that end, we know there's a lot more work to do. And we know that the next step in the process for you is looking at the national codes as they're finalized and working with NYSERDA's recommendations for reaching energy savings that are more stringent than the national standards. And a new code that includes the robust efficiency and resiliency standards that are in line with the state scoping plan recommendations. And as you work to incorporate the zero emissions new construction requirements assigned to the Code Council, keep in mind that every new building constructed with fossil fuels is one that will have to convert down the line to meet the state's climate targets. We shouldn't be building new buildings with fossil fuels. And new residential construction only adds a small fraction, about 0.2%, to the state's 5 million residential buildings. So we're really only incrementally adding a small manageable amount of new electricity demand to the state's grid. And with that in mind, efficient electric buildings are the goal here. And so with a new code that will save more energy than ever before, you all play a unique role here to make sure we achieve that. So thanks for the opportunity to come today. Look forward to making it.
Thank you so much.
Tim Bowl, followed by Amber Ruther.
Thank you. I apologize for outbursts before. I'm a director with New York State Fire Chiefs. I've been a firefighter for 25 years. I've seen the advantages of sprinklers and disadvantages of not having sprinklers. New York State Fire Chiefs stand firm with the State Fire Administrator and their mission to incorporate sprinklers here across New York State, not only to make our citizens safer, but also the firefighters that protect them safer. And I applaud the work that the council has done and continues to do in making New York safe. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Amber Ruther.
Hello, my name is Amber Ruther, and I'm the organizing coordinator at Alliance.
Can't hear you, Amber.
At Alliance for a Green Economy. We are a nonprofit advocacy group that organizes for climate action and energy affordability, and we know that building weatherization and electrification is critical to achieve both of those goals. Burning fossil fuels, including natural gas, is the #1 source of greenhouse gas pollution in New York State. And unless we get our buildings off of fossil fuels as quickly as possible, we will see more climate disasters like the smoke that blanketed the state this month get increasingly worse and more frequent. Experts on New York's Climate Action Council found that the financial cost of keeping our fossil fuel status quo would exceed the cost of necessary climate action by more than $115 billion. We can't afford not to act now. I'm worried about all of our futures and the marginalized people who are already suffering and dying from the impacts of climate change. And the fact that we are still moving in the wrong direction on climate by building new fossil fuel infrastructure is outrageous. That's why I and hundreds of others poured thousands of hours into organizing for and winning the 3 climate laws we're urging you to implement now, as you're obligated to do by New York State law. The first law is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, and I just want to highlight some key provisions of that bill. It gives the Department of State not only the legal authority, but the legal obligation to assess and promulgate regulations to achieve the emissions reduction targets in all of your decisions, including permits and administrative approvals. So we believe that you should be aiming to get all of our buildings to net zero emissions by 2050 in all of your policies. It clearly states that you have to review whether the building code is consistent with or will interfere with the statewide greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, and whether any of these decisions disproportionately burden disadvantaged communities with pollution. And if the decision does not allow us to meet our climate targets in time, you must provide justification in a detailed statement and identify alternatives for mitigation. So we believe that this really already requires you to implement codes that will also reduce emissions from existing buildings. The Advanced Building Codes Act of 2022 makes this even more clear by authorizing the Building Codes Council to adopt a new code, including the Climate Action Council Scoping Plan recommendations, which also address the rehabilitation of existing structures. How many? Sorry.
Down to 8.
Okay. And then we also really need you to promulgate regulations around fire safety for indoor battery storage, which has been a huge barrier to electrification in New York City. And I just want to say that please do what is legally mandated and morally right for you to do. Implement our building electrification laws, and we're already out of time on climate. We should have acted to move off fossil fuels decades ago. Future generations will look back on the decisions you made in this critical year as a key turning point, either towards an utterly unlivable future of climate collapse, or towards a future where everyone can have a healthy, sustainable, comfortable home. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, that's everybody on the list for this office. Did I miss anybody in the room? Okay. We also did have 112 upstairs at 11:35, but there is nobody in those rooms.
Okay.
So I think we can move on to New York City.
We have 4 people here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First will be Cliff Fonstein. Or Fonstein.
It's Fonstein, Cliff Fonstein,
Thank
but
you.
thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Cliff Fonstein. I'm a member of RAC New York, a faith-based organization engaged in social justice advocacy. We are the social justice arm of Reform Judaism in New York State, with 99 synagogues, and 150,000 congregants. During the past 2 years, we have worked hard to advocate for the passage of the All-Electric Building Act, calling, writing, and meeting with legislators all across the states. And in May, we were very thankful that it was included in the budget bill. Now the ball is in your court for you to do what the act compels you to do. First off, I want to say why we care about the All-Electric Building Act and why we fought so hard to pass it. It's because our tradition teaches us that we are responsible to look after the earth and preserve it for future generations. As is said in a powerful midrash, do not destroy my world, for if you do, there will be nobody after you to make it right again. It is also important what you, the Building Council, does. The Torah provides several examples of the need for builders to adhere precisely to code, especially when the goal is to care for and protect God's creation. In chapter 6 of Genesis, for example, Noah is given detailed instructions on the building of the ark, the vessel that will perpetuate life on earth. The requirement of exactitude is creating, or in your case, updating the blueprint is clear. Our failure, yours to ensure that New York State starts off firmly on a path to a carbon-free future, and ours to pay attention to what you do, will have consequences that will bring shame on all of us. We can't let that happen. The current building code was written before 3 important climate laws were enacted: the Climate Leadership Act, the Advanced Building Codes Act, and the All-Electric Buildings Act. All these laws compel that the 2024 update must incorporate these laws and in a way that embodies their precise meaning and intent. The All-Electric Building Act, for example, requires that the building code shall prohibit equipment and building systems that burn fossil fuels in newly constructed buildings after certain dates. The earliest implementation date is December 2025, well before the next building code update will be completed. The budget bill in May is also clear that in updating the building code, you must keep in mind the overarching direction the legislature has given. And I'm quoting, to the fullest extent feasible, the code shall be designed to help achieve the state's clean energy and climate agenda, and the code shall enable the state's clean energy objectives. We ask the Council to scrupulously implement the wording and intent of the climate legislation. We will watch closely and fully support your endeavor, and we look forward to seeing the next draft. Thank you.
Next
Thank
is
you.
Allison.
I'm sorry
Next
to
up is
interrupt.
Allison
Can I
Considine.
get him to spell his last name, please?
Yes, it's Fonstein.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Next speaker.
Hi, yeah, my name's Allison Considine, last name Considine. Good afternoon to Mr. Wen, Mr. Sabatino, and the rest of the Codes Council. I work as the Senior Manager for Campaigns for the Building Decarbonization Coalition. We are a nonprofit that aligns critical stakeholders on the path to transform the nation's buildings through clean energy, charting the course to eliminate fossil fuels from our buildings, to improve people's health, cut air pollution, cut climate pollution, prioritize high-road jobs, and ensure that our communities are more resilient to the impacts of climate change. The 2024 Building Code is expected to be historic. In the last few years, as many speakers have said, we've passed 3 critical pieces of climate legislation, and the scoping plan, the Climate Action Council advanced a visionary scoping plan. There were several recommendations within that scoping plan that went beyond what was recently legislated in the All-Electric Buildings Act and in the Advanced Codes and Standards Act. Building emissions are about 1/3 of our state's overall emissions. There is simply no path to meet the mandate of the CLCPA without significantly reducing building emissions, and we trust that the Code Council will recognize the importance of the code in achieving our climate goals going forward. The AEBA's mandate to achieve zero emissions in new buildings begins in 2026 and includes electrification-ready requirements. This law requires that these updates be included in the code, and the CAC scoping plan further required improved energy efficiency, weatherization, energy storage, and on-site renewable energy generation. Unfortunately, the draft building code update was only made publicly available yesterday, This isn't really adequate time for advocates to review and be able to give meaningful feedback, and so we would also ask the Code Council to release materials earlier in advance of public meetings so that there can be robust discussion from participants. We look forward at the BDC to working in partnership with the Code Council and NYSERDA and ensuring that the CLCPA, the Advanced Codes and Standards Act, the All Electric Building Act, and the Scoping Plan recommendations are fully reflected in the 2024 code. When this comprehensive code is in effect, we will all reap the benefits for health, air pollution, high road jobs, safer, more resilient communities. I myself live in New York City, suffer from asthma, have no choice but to have a gas stove in my home to cook, and I really think we are on the cusp of a brighter, healthier future, and that starts with recognizing the immense cost savings and health benefits of beginning this with new construction and beginning this in the fastest possible manner in this upcoming code. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Next up is Anshul Gupta.
Good afternoon. My name is Anshul Gupta, and I'm the Senior Policy Analyst at New Yorkers for Clean Power. As we heard earlier today, since the last code update, major pieces of legislation have passed that impact the state's fire prevention and building code. In addition to specific prescriptions, the Advanced Building Codes and Efficiency Standards Act of 2022 mandates that, to the fullest extent feasible, the standards for construction of buildings in the code shall be designed to help achieve the state's clean energy and climate agenda as identified by the Climate Action Council. The Climate Action Council's recommendations are detailed in Chapter 12 of the Scoping Plan and must be incorporated in the 2024 Energy Code update. More recently, the 2023 budget legislation prohibits the use of fossil fuels in most buildings up to seven floors by the end of 2025 and clarifies that financial considerations shall not be sufficient basis to determine physical or technical infeasibility. The fossil fuel industry and its allies have been engaged in egregious disinformation campaigns against New York climate initiatives. Fear-mongering around costs and the reliability and capacity of the electric grid, as well as mischaracterization of NYSO's reports are commonplace. So are the concerns about the speed and the time frames of the energy transition. The Building Code Council is urged to disregard these and follow the state law. New York City, Ithaca, and the city of Beacon are moving ahead with modern building and electrification codes because of their climate benefits at a much faster time frame. After Washington state law mandated a 70% reduction in energy consumption in buildings from 2006 levels by 2031, the Washington State Building Code Council acted by passing an all-electric space and water heating code for new construction last year to go into effect later this year. Builders in all these cities, municipalities, and states are able to transition to fossil-free construction at a much faster time frame than New York State law mandates. So, for the sake of the credibility of this body, it is imperative that the Building Code Council members vote to approve the 2024 Building Code update only if the code is consistent with the intent and the letter of the state's energy and environmental protection laws, which the current draft is not. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, Clifton Smith.
Good afternoon. My name is Clifton Smith. My pronoun is here, and I'm part of the Climate Justice and Packages. So today, my subject is to build clean, renewable energy for all the clean and good green jobs. Build Public Renewable Act will allow the New York Power Authority a lawsuit with public power providing in the country to build renewable energy quickly, investing and dramatically powering NYPA to meet the Climate Act mandate of 17% neutral, and also provide a plan to guide the replacement and development of the New York State fossil fuel factory and set by 2030. And they also give state injury power and guidance and needed to implement that the Climate Act that ensure that our energy system recoverable and transportation to the public. We are Home Energy Affordable Transit Act. We will give a public service commission authority and directly guidance GAD authority with the Climate Act emission reducing the climate justice mandate. Okay, so I'm up to 3. It says make the state worst of major oil companies pay for the harm they cause. And they will end the most injuring state official 3.330 million to climate crisis, according to the fossil fuel ministry, and also is beautiful spending packages from the investing in our New York Commission that will ensure that the state eliminate wasteful handout or military commission, and that rise to New York will pay what they own.
15 seconds.
Law. Thank you guys and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for New York.
Thank you, China.
All right, Kevin. Do we have anybody in the Buffalo office?
Jada Mike, let's rock. So I wasn't expecting with the long line of folks on the list to speak to be able to read my comments today, but I'm happy to give you to issue them orally today.
Can I ask
thank you all.
Can I ask you to give your name for the record first?
Of sure, I certainly will. My name is Eric Walker, and I'm representing the We Act for Environmental Justice, which is based out of Harlem in New York City.
Thank you.
So I'll give you a abridged version of my written comments and submit them for consideration, the fuller version for consideration via email, which I've done already. Good afternoon at this point, everyone. My name is Eric Walker. I'm the Senior Policy Manager for Energy Justice at We Act for Environmental Justice. I appreciate the opportunity to give these comments here with you all today. As you may know, We Act as a community-based organization that has been building healthy communities by ensuring that people of color and low-income residents participate meaningfully in the creation of a sound and fair environmental health policies and practices in New York State for more than 30 years. Since the passage of the 2019 Climate Act, We Act has served on the Climate Justice Working Group to support key elements of implementing the Climate Act, providing strategic advice and incorporating the needs of disadvantaged communities in the Climate Act scoping plan. We Act has some serious concerns regarding the lack of conformity of the proposed changes to the code with the Climate Act requirement that the Council consider the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals and prohibit disproportionate burdens on disadvantaged communities. The Climate Act prohibits the Building Code Council, the Division of Codes and Standards, and the Department of State from approving the code updates that continue in a way that continues to disproportionately burden disadvantaged communities, noting Section 7.3 of the Climate Act, which I won't read for you today, which we can all reference at some other point. But in addition, the Disadvantaged Communities Barriers and Opportunities Report, also required by the Climate Act, specifically recommends that updates to the code, rules, and policies that currently limit or prevent climate change solutions be used to increase building health and safety, and energy code enforcement efforts and partnerships to address building integrity from a health and safety perspective. Furthermore, the Climate Action Council Scoping Plan advises that and directs that, as appropriate, all state entities are expected to incorporate these themes and 8 recommendations from the barriers report into their program administration and process activities for the implementation of the Climate Act. In concluding my comments here today, I want to reiterate the importance of bringing the building code into conformity with the Climate Act and related electrification laws, especially for disadvantaged communities across the state. There's no question it should be front and center at this critical juncture in the state's clean energy transition. And as the council moves forward with reviewing the proposed changes, WEAC and other advocacy groups will continue to weigh in on these critical issues and look forward to continued dialogue with the council. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else in Buffalo?
Don't think so. I will also take this opportunity before we move on to the next speaker to request that Pangiota's summary of that she gave earlier from this meeting be made available to the folks at this meeting in an accessible written format that uses common language. Thank you.
To provide the law. Okay. Kevin?
Okay, I'll ask everyone to bear with me a little bit here. We have a number of people signed up to speak remotely, and I have to match up your name with your original sign up with a name that is now displaying on the screen. So, and some of you signed up to speak online and are here in person, so if I call your name twice, I'm sorry. The first person, I'm going to go in order of when people signed up, so the first person to have signed up versus the last person. And if anyone is on and signed up in the last hour or so, please write into Chad Severs and let him know because I downloaded the form about an hour ago. So that said, up first, I will say what I'll do is I'll say your name, I will unmute you. Actually, I'll say your name and the next person, and then I'll unmute the first person. So Bill Nowak is up first, followed by Jay Best.
Bill Nowak. I live in Buffalo, and I'm a board member of the New York Geothermal Energy Organization. What New York has experienced to date, including smoke poisoning our air from Canadian wildfires, is nothing compared to what millions of people around the world are living through as our climate destabilizes through greenhouse gases trapping heat in our atmosphere. These include droughts, famines, mass migrations, border clashes, the extinction of species, the spread of disease, and the destruction of homes. But I want to focus my comments on my own personal experience here in Buffalo. Over this past Christmas, I experienced a storm that was far and away the most severe of any in my 72 years in this community. Buffalonians were trapped indoors for about 48 hours. On the second evening, our tenant and I went out for a short walk to try and get the full experience. We made it about 7 houses down the block in deep snow and fierce winds before realizing we had to head back. About 5 years ago, my next door neighbor and I had planted sycamore trees in front of both our houses, which have grown quickly to a decent size. During the storm, a 100-year-old maple fell across our street. It would have crushed our neighbor's house if it hadn't landed in the sycamore. Some would claim that the Codes Council should slow walk the adoption of the All-Electric Building Act because some Western New Yorkers claimed they survive power outages by turning on gas appliances to provide heat. That would be missing the point. There are a few gas appliances that function without electricity to turn them on and help them distribute heat. Even so, none of the gas appliances in existing buildings would be touched by the mandate. The Code Council has been tasked with requiring us construction and rebuild, and those new well-insulated homes under the code will be far better able to retain heat and get us through power outages. Gas appliances are a 20th century solution to 20th century problems. For 21st century all-electric new builds, resiliency is taking the form of superior insulation, very efficient appliances, community-wide responses, microgrids, batteries, and bidirectional charging from electric vehicles. 47 of my brothers and sisters died in that December 22nd storm. I would bet all of them had gas heating systems in their homes. The destruction caused by that storm was far more powerful than anything gas appliances can shield us from. It is in all our interest to stop slow walking our response to climate destabilization and to begin sprinting as the science indicates we need to do. Stopping fossil fuel combustion in new builds is the equivalent of stopping digging when we're in a hole. It's the simplest place to start. Please follow the law in the strongest way possible and take fossil fuel combustion out of the codes for new construction. And please do include the Climate Action Plan's recommendations as you develop the new code. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jay Best, followed by Melissa Carlson. And Jay, you should be unmuted.
Okay, I guess I'll take that as a yes. My name's Jay Best. I'm the president and founder of Green Team Long Island, a company of 70 people specializing in residential energy efficiency. And I'm also the vice president of the Building Performance Contractors Association of New York, BPCA, representing over 100 contractors working around New York State. On behalf of Green Team and the contract members of BPCA, we believe that building code revisions in New York State must, one, support electrification of new construction for the All-Electric Buildings Act, two, address the recommendations of the Climate Action Council for the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act, and three, reduce disproportionate impacts on disadvantaged communities with greenhouse gas pollution, also per the Climate Act. Building codes are critical, as you guys know, for a number of reasons. One, they establish best practices. Two, they establish a system of quality control. And three, they reduce, if everyone's doing it, it reduces the cost to the general public. Building code revisions that include energy efficiency are critical to New York. Residential and commercial sectors, energy standards for new buildings are the most important single measures for building energy efficiency. Energy efficiency requirements in building codes extend beyond new buildings as they serve the efficiency target for improvements in existing buildings. Energy standards can be obtained at lower costs when other energy efficiency construction takes place. So today's requirements for new building energy efficiency codes will lower consumer costs for the next 30 years because the efficiency of new buildings will influence energy consumption until renovations or even over the entire lifetime of the property. The decisions during design and construction now will influence building use and consumer expense for the next 30 years or more. Lost opportunities in the construction phase will lead to these increased costs, and if done later, can hugely inflate the cost for future users. Building-related end uses, heating, cooling, ventilation, and hot water require about 75% of residential buildings' energy demand. Building codes address these drivers of building-related consumption. Our consumers care about four things that upgraded energy efficiency building codes would protect. Their consumers care about costs, they care about comfort, they care about health and safety of people. Building codes can either be obstacles or protections for New York citizens. You must implement energy efficiency building codes to protect the consumers of New York State. Building codes set the minimum and maximum standards. Many building buyers interpret the existing codes to be sufficient, but the truth is the existing ones aren't. The standards rarely represent the optimum. Building codes, I'll just conclude, as a business owner, contractor, and homeowner, I can tell you that building efficient buildings that are fully electrified is doable, cost-effective, and will create jobs that help all New Yorkers while making our homes more comfortable, safer, healthier, and lower cost to operate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Melissa Carlson, followed by Heather Dees. Okay, Melissa, you should be unmuted.
I live in Rochester, Western New York. As a sole practitioner, I work on renovations of single-family homes. I'm not representing anybody but myself here and my clients. My clients come to me with goals about the use of their space. I have to educate them on the energy used by those spaces. They accept what I tell them about insulation levels. They don't ask much about space heating or cooling, but assume what they have is fine. I also educate them about heat pumps and why they might be better than their high-efficiency furnace. It is me versus the media, Aunt Susan, and neighbor Joe. Maybe they heard about heat pumps, but electricity is for light bulbs. What about power outages? Why should they spend the extra money on insulation? Just do what code requires, and that's the best we can do, right? I have no support in the code to do better. I need the code to back me up, from the client side and for the building officials who review it. I need the code to support electrification. As someone who is climate aware, I have been pushing state legislators to adopt laws that are required by New York's Climate Act. I'm glad for the All-Electric Building Act, the Advanced Building Codes Act, and the requirements of the Climate Action Council, bringing my climate activism into my daily job. I have an all-electric house now, so I can tell clients about that in a more reliable way than discussing code. I look forward to the code backing me up by promoting clean energy and highly efficient buildings, as the climate law says it must incorporate. Code will also affect all the people who will never be my clients, the tenants and the renters who don't own buildings nor buy their own heating equipment. All New Yorkers should benefit from the climate law, but it needs to be in our code to make it tangible. I need the code to support electrification, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, for air quality, for our health. I'm aware of the challenges with our current electric grid, but that's not my vocation. In our economy, I am helping create the demand for the infrastructure that will be able to supply the clean energy. It's the economy that is creating jobs that will fill our needs in an equitable manner. I am looking to push change in the positive direction of future clean energy growth. Codes are constantly changing, and I'm glad for the upgrades I couldn't imagine 30 years ago. We can't stop change, so I'm asking you to shape our future to be resilient in the way the climate law imagines it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here.
Thank you so much.
Next up, we have Heather Dees, and followed by Steve Cowell. So Heather, just give me a moment. All right, Heather, you should be unmuted.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Heather Dees. I lead policy and regulatory affairs for Dandelion Energy, and I'm a board member with NYGEO, our statewide geothermal industry association. We wanted to share our perspective as a contractor on the feasibility and timing of transitioning to an all-electric HVAC system requirement for new construction in New York. Dandelion Energy was founded in New York 6 years ago, and we have grown to become the nation's leading residential geothermal heating and cooling company. Today, we are a team of 280 employees, 2/3 of whom are in the field every day, installing geothermal ground loops and heat pumps for our customers in New York, Connecticut, and Massachusetts. To date, we have installed geothermal systems in 1,500 homes. In the last year, we have made major investments to scale our business. We opened new locations, we purchased a dozen drill rigs, and we hired dozens of new employees. As a result, we are projecting 100% year-over-year growth for the next 2 years. Today, only 10 to 15% of our business is installing new homes. Most of our business is retrofits. Almost all of our new home projects have been one geothermal system installation at a time for individuals building a new home. We project that the all-electric HVAC requirements for new construction in New York will create significant increased market pull for our product, allowing us to scale the new construction component of our business in the state much more quickly than we otherwise will be able to do. We estimate that with 18 months notice from around mid-2023 to January 2025 for the all-electric HVAC requirement being implemented in the building codes, we will be able to scale our operations to be positioned to install 1,000 to 1,500 geothermal heating and cooling systems in new homes in 2025. That would account for around 10% of the 12,000 new homes built in New York each year. We anticipate further scaling our new construction business by 50% year over year for 2026. Without the all-electric building mandate, we would likely be installing geothermal heating and cooling in only around 100 new construction single-family homes in 2025, in addition to our retrofit business. In other words, the all-electric HVAC requirement will allow us to scale our business for new homes at more than 10 times the rate we otherwise would, as long as New York keeps pace with the clean heat utility rebate programs and other incentives that reward the efficiency benefits and electric grid benefits offered by geothermal heating and cooling. Given that Dandelion is one of multiple residential geothermal installers in the state, and there are thousands of air source heat pumps already being installed in New York buildings every year, the overall heat pump industry, geothermal and air source, is well positioned to meet the need for all electric new buildings in 2025. The new building code for all electric HVAC will provide surety to our investors on the sides of the market for our products. It will allow us to take advantage of operational efficiencies of installing multiple systems at once in new home developments with dozens or hundreds of systems installed in one neighborhood at a time. To meet this growth, we will engage in active and aggressive hiring and training. We anticipate creating 130 jobs for our new construction business in 2025 and growing that to 200 jobs for 2026. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you so much. Okay, up next we have Steve Cowell, followed by John Rath. All right, Steve, you should be unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, great. Okay. I'm Steve Cowell. I'm the Executive Director of Northeast Energy Efficiency and Electrification Council and have been working in energy efficiency and clean energy for 44 years and had the honor of developing and operating the New York Energy Efficiency Program for NYSERDA for almost 20 years and doing that in 26 states. So I've been in and around this for quite a while. And I'd just like to very quickly present the position of NEEEC that we support the electrification requirement, moving towards electrification for new construction. We also propose that these requirements include adequate energy efficiency. And I know that the codes have included that, and I admit that I have not had a chance to go through in detail the proposal, the draft that was put out, I believe, yesterday. But obviously, the big picture is adequate energy efficiency to make sure that the heating and cooling works effectively and delivers effectively. And we should, I did not see a requirement that heat pumps and other electric technologies are required as part of the new code. In addition, I would say that having a requirement that electrification in the home be ready for both EV charging and solar with the appropriate electric system components, such as electric availability levels and adequate wiring and panels. So the only concern would be to address an electric grid capability to deliver the electricity needed. And that we've studied in several regions, that it is available, but it needs to be watched carefully just to make sure. And I would just recommend a regular meeting between the council and ISO New York, just to make sure that you and they are totally confident that the electric system, the cleaner electric system, is sufficient to meet the full electrification needs and work together to make sure of that. And I do have some concerns. I admit I did not have a chance to go through in detail the details of the new draft code. So much of this may be in there, and I don't have to jump up and down, but it is important, I think, that the code process follow and connect with legislative policy and mandates. And it would be good, I think, if there was in addition to the type of draft presentation, that there be a summary description in English or Spanish of the goals and objectives of those changes, just so that it's easier and better for the public to better understand what's being accomplished, which I know is not easy, and I totally respect the challenge that you all have in moving codes into the future. So with that, I did submit a written document as well. So good luck to all of you and to all the great speakers who have come. Unfortunately, I'm not in New York right now, just a couple miles away, but
Thank you, sir.
very much.
We appreciate it.
Okay, up next, we're gonna have John Rath, followed by Claire Henry. All right, John, you should be unmuted.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. My name is John Rath. I'm Director of Operations for the New York Geothermal Energy Organization, or New York GEO. You've heard from two of our board members, Bill Nowak and Heather Deese, so I'll try to supplement what they said, not repeat it. New York GEO is a nonprofit trade group that represents heat pump installers, manufacturers, distributors, drillers, consultants, and other industry stakeholders, both in New York and beyond. And for our members, it's pretty simple. Our state needs codes that meet the statutory requirements set forth in the CLCPA, the All Electric Building Act, and the Advanced Building Codes and Standards Act. Currently, we don't see evidence of that in your draft proposed changes, and so we as a trade group request that changes be made to comply with the legislation. As the previous speaker said, haven't had a thorough opportunity to dissect it, so if I'm wrong, my apologies, please correct me. And specifically regarding our geothermal heating and cooling industry, we are definitely willing, ready, and able to help with a quick transition to a cleaner, healthier environment. Thanks to our geothermal technology, especially with the thermal ground battery, we can now operate buildings so efficiently that the heating and cooling does not drive peak energy usage anymore, even on the coldest days of the year. And that is certified by state agencies. I guess in closing, I recall the chair's comment about young daughters and fire safety codes, and that certainly is a scary thing. For me and my kids, it's as equally scary about having a planet that would be on fire and not take the urgency necessary to fix it. Thank you very much for letting us represent the members of New York GEO.
Thank you so much.
Up next, we have Claire Henry, followed by John Steele. All right, Claire, you should be unmuted. Are you there, Claire?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Oh, perfect. Great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to comment today. My name is Claire Henry, and I work for the Climate Solutions Accelerator of the Genesee Finger Lakes region, based in Rochester, New York. We serve 9 counties with a diverse population of over 1 million people. We catalyze local efforts to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions while working towards our vision of a thriving region on a healthy planet. I am here representing my team at the Accelerator, but also myself and my family. And I will speak today about just one reason why it is so important that we implement the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, reduce our greenhouse gas emissions with strategies like all-electric buildings, and to remind you of the vital role you play in that effort. I know you've been reminded several times already today. I am a mother of 2, and last fall, my then 6-week-old daughter was hospitalized with RSV, as were so many other New York children. While she made a full recovery, she is now at a higher risk of developing asthma. An exposure to poor air quality from gas combustion at home or daycare, as well as from climate change-related phenomena, will just heighten that risk. As you can imagine, we didn't take her outside much during that first week of June as the wildfire smoke blanketed the state. As the climate crisis proceeds, we will see an increase in the number and severity of these types of events. We're already seeing a longer allergy season, which exacerbates asthma. Children who suffer from worsening asthma miss more school, and parents of sick kids, I know this for real, miss more work. Because of stark health disparities, these impacts will burden families of color at higher rates. It is these seemingly small but insidious ways that climate change is already disrupting our lives by making us sicker that worry me the most. And I know a concern for our children is something I share with members of this council. In our region, the building sector makes up the second largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, while in the state it is the #1 emitter. Constructing buildings without fossil fuel combustion on site will decrease pollutants, save money, and is a crucial step in addressing the climate crisis. Support for all-electric new buildings is broad. For instance, back in the spring, the New York State American Academy of Pediatrics issued a statement of support. The council has the responsibility and the opportunity to address the climate crisis and protect the most vulnerable in New York by ensuring the Uniform Code complies fully with the All-Electric Building Act. As I'm sure you know, the council falls under the New York's Department of State, the mission of which includes making our communities both more livable and more resilient. I know that you would like to live up to that mission, so I implore you to prioritize the needs of New York communities and incorporate all-electric buildings in the new Uniform Building Code. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, next up we have John Steele, followed by Emma Lagley. All right, John, you should be unmuted now.
John Steele here. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. Members of the council and staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Steele, and I work for Johnson Controls, a global building technology company. I am before you today to ask that you support Johnson Controls' proposals to improve indoor air quality in Group A, B, E, and I occupancies. If adopted, they will improve the health, wellness, and productivity of building occupants by dependably providing cleaner indoor air. According to the US EPA, indoor pollutant levels are on average 2 to 5 times, sometimes as high as 100 times, higher than outdoor levels. The proposals before you, MC 04, 0023, and 0024, require that HVAC system design airflows be able to accommodate a MERV 13 filter when greater air filtration is required, and that carbon dioxide sensors be installed for every 500 square feet of occupiable space. The Centers for Disease Control recently called for upgrading central HVAC filter efficiency to a MERV 13 or better. Both proposals are in the 2024 International Mechanical Code Appendix and were voted in with more than 90% of the vote. Greater air filtration, when needed, reduces the risk of airborne contagions, viruses, dust, mites, and other contaminants being introduced into building spaces and inhaled by occupants. Carbon dioxide sensors will detect when excessive amounts of carbon dioxide accumulate in a room, a signal that the indoor air is not fresh and could contain contaminants. These sensors will trigger the introduction of fresh air into the space, significantly reducing health risks to occupants. These proposals are impactful yet inexpensive ways to provide building occupants with cleaner indoor air. Enhancing a new air handling unit to accommodate a MERV 13 filter is typically less than $1 per square foot, and installing a CO2 sensor is typically less than 50 cents per square foot. Both proposals have the support of numerous advocacy organizations, including the New York chapter of the American Institute of Architects, the American Lung Association, the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, the International Well Building Institute, and United Spinal. Soon you will receive a letter of endorsement for the proposals from these and other organizations. I respectfully ask that the council adopt 23 and 24. By doing so, New York will demonstrate code leadership on indoor air quality, leadership that will prioritize occupant health, well-being, and productivity while fortifying buildings against future health threats. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, Emma Bagley, followed by Jared Rodriguez. Emma, you should be unmuted now.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the council members for the opportunity to speak. My name is Emma Lagle, and I am with the PACE Energy and Climate Center at the Elizabeth Haub School of Law. At PACE, we are committed to advancing clean energy technologies to reduce emissions and help communities, industry, local governments, and New York State achieve the emissions reduction mandates in the CLCPA. Key to achieving these goals is integration of the CLCPA and two other pieces of recent legislation into the 2024 Building Code Update, the 2023 All-Electric Building Act, and the 2022 Advanced Building Codes Act. We've heard that the All-Electric Building Act requires the council to prohibit fossil fuel equipment or heating systems in new buildings depending on height, starting in 2026 or 2029. The language of the AEBA is clear, that this council must adopt its directives with no loopholes or exceptions besides those expressly identified in the AEBA. This landmark legislation, the first of its kind in the country, offers a major opportunity to curb anticipated emissions from the building sector and a chance to advance thermal energy network technologies for heating and cooling needs in new development. NYSERDA, the PSC, municipalities, the joint utilities, and industry stakeholders are working hard to scale thermal technologies, which are capable of providing occupants of new buildings with clean, reliable, and affordable space heating and cooling without need for fossil fuel connections. The 2024 code update must integrate the AEBA, including requiring all permits filed for construction of new buildings starting in 2025 to include highly insulated thermal performance and airtightness, electric readiness for space conditioning, cooking dryers and hot water, and electric vehicle readiness where parking is provided. It is time to remove fossil fuel combustion from new buildings and help rapidly usher in clean, viable alternative technologies. This brings me to the second piece of legislation, the Advanced Building Code Act. The Advanced Building Code Act updated the state's energy law to require this council to actively promote emissions reduction in both new buildings and rehabilitation of existing buildings. Section 11-104, subsection 6 of the energy law now requires the Building Code Council to update the code to include the Climate Action Council scoping plan recommendations and to not approve a proposed 2024 code update until you have demonstrated review of the recommendations and determined how to include them to the fullest extent feasible. Through the code update, the council must meaningfully engage in studying the feasibility of the Climate Action Council's recommendations in a public process that ultimately adopts the recommendations wherever and however they are feasible. In conclusion, PACE reminds this council that it must act in conformance with the law and urges you to act decisively to move the building sector in New York State into compliance with the CLCPA mandates. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we have Jared Rodriguez, followed by Ann Grabe. All right, Jared, you should be unmuted now.
Yep, thanks so much. So my name is Jared Rodriguez. I'm an advisor to government, building owners, regulated utilities, and other organizations on decarbonization, energy transition, strategic planning, and economic development. And I'm also an elected trustee of the Village of Sleepy Hollow in the Hudson Valley. So with regard to the earlier communicated issue of developers fronting the cost of gas infrastructure in new subdivisions or development, we've experienced these hurdles in Westchester County when the regulated gas utility proposed a gas moratorium due to its inability to provide new gas capacity in its territory. Those real estate developers that had an approved load letter from the utility prior to the moratorium were, quote, grandfathered in, but no real estate developer without an approved load letter at the imposition of the moratorium would be served going forward, and therefore that site could not be served with gas. The gas moratorium in Westchester County, which is arguably the most active real estate development market in New York State outside of New York City, has not dampened real estate development activity here. Just wanted to say that. The conversations happening here and at the political level are quite public. So my question is, why would a real estate developer continue to pursue investing in gas infrastructure if they're currently aware that they will not ultimately recover in their investment? Is this not part of the basic investment risks all real estate developers undertake in their regular business? A real estate developer would not, for example, make investments in full construction drawing sets for a project that didn't have local planning or zoning board approval. Additionally, it's worth noting any and all state-supported affordable housing, for example, particularly housing developed through the Department of Homes and Community Renewal, are to be all electric going forward. So that's a note to take here. The developer considering the subdivision or project would be well advised by local code enforcement and regulated gas utilities of options available other than gas, including the possibility of including utility thermal energy network infrastructure instead of gas infrastructure. So I encourage promulgation and distribution of education materials to get our local code enforcers up to speed with regard to these issues and the technology. This body should also be, or should more deeply understand the many technical options available to make buildings all electric buildings, including the provision of thermal energy networks. I would just like to point to the work of NYSERDA on the resource efficient decarbonization approach, which is necessary for phased implementation of efficient all electric buildings. Also, I'm concerned the board is unaware of whether, I heard this comment earlier, unaware of whether or not all the Climate Action Council specific recommendations were incorporated into the current draft. The climate law is New York State law. All New York State actors working in the building industry should understand the law in full, or risk making unwise economic investments in stranded assets like gas infrastructure. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Up next, we have Ann Ray, followed by Janice Kruger. Ann, you should be unmuted.
Environmental Policy Director for the New York Public Interest Research Group, NYPIRG. It's a not-for-profit statewide research and advocacy organization. Appreciate the opportunity to speak during this public comment period today. As you've heard from many, since the last code update, major policies have been adopted to implement the 2019 Climate Act to help the state achieve the 2030 greenhouse gas reduction targets, which is critical to address the worsening climate crisis. The Council has a very important role in addressing the climate crisis through the timely promulgation of comprehensive updates to the state code to incorporate these new laws. The governor and legislature have approved statutes which are very prescriptive and detailed. For instance, the definition of feasible was made crystal clear in the All-Electric Building Act. Specifically, the energy law now states that, quote, financial considerations shall not be sufficient basis to determine physical or technical infeasibility, end quote. Therefore, the definition of feasibility includes what is physically or technically feasible and not what is financially or economically feasible. This is a clear directive to the Council to ensure that the updated codes are effective and impactful. And we also would like to mention that if there are needs that the Council feels in terms of staff support or resources support to deal with the timely code update implementation, we in the environmental movement would love to hear about that and advocate for an increase in resources or staff to do that. Wanted this quote from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, about why we're in this situation and why we have to implement the All-Electric Building Act and other key climate crisis-oriented laws. As we all know, the planet and the public's health have never been so imperiled. And just 7 months ago, the UN Secretary General noted, quote, greenhouse gas emissions keep growing, global temperatures keep rising, and our planet is fast approaching tipping points that will make climate chaos irreversible. We are on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator, end quote. So this is what the scientists are telling us. This is what our Climate Action Council was telling us, and the legislature and governor have responded by passing and approving these really important laws. As others have noted, in New York, our building sector accounts for at least 32% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions. I want to note, though, that Dr. Bob Howarth, a Climate Action Council member, a Cornell University earth scientist, has estimated actually upwards to 40% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions come from the building sector. Be happy to send that information and citations about that key point in terms of greenhouse gas emission sectors. These new laws have been approved to greatly reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from the building sector. And we urge the Council and note that it's really incumbent on the Council to take immediate steps to adopt new codes that fully implement building electrification and energy efficiency laws as soon as possible to begin to address the climate crisis in our state. We have no time to lose, and we look forward to working with the council on an accelerated timetable to implement these updated and comprehensive codes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, Janice Kruger, followed by Jeannie Bergman. All right, Janice, you should be unmuted now.
Hello, everyone. This is Janice Kruger. I am the lead for volunteers of Rewiring America for New York State. And I wanted to represent all of our volunteers in stating that it is so important to think about the code beyond new construction to all of the buildings that already exist that we need to decarbonize. And I wanted to draw attention to the fact that electric heat pump water heaters, induction ovens, and electric dryers are vastly more efficient than their oil and gas-fired counterparts. And electrifying these appliances reduces energy use and pollution and also improves comfort, efficiency, and savings. I live in New York City, and I experienced the quote-unquote climate hell that our previous speaker just mentioned in the form of a wildfire that burned in another country and that I could smell in New York City, and that my volunteer counterpart in DC also saw and smelled. And the fact that the building sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas pollution in New York State is the reason that we are asking this body to consider how to envision a future in which we properly address the greenhouse gas emissions from our building sector through this code, which all of you are tasked with doing. And before I end, I'd like to reiterate the wonderful Midrash quote that was given by Mr. Fonstein earlier. There will be nobody after us to make it right again. So it is really incumbent upon all of us to ask ourselves, what can we do to prevent the climate emergency from really reaching its full fruition? Thank you so much, and thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Jeannie Bergman and Danielle Sterling. All right, Jeannie, you should be unmuted now.
To give comments today. My name is Jean Bergman. I live in Saugerties. I'm a homeowner, and I work with Sane Energy Project. It was illuminating to hear the discussion about implementing sprinkler requirements in new buildings to keep people safe. As one council member said, we should do anything we can to make homes safe. Bringing building codes in line with the CLCPA and the AEBA is required by law and by common sense. All electric homes are safer and healthier than combusting gas in buildings. Gas stoves and heating systems are the main causes of home fires, and they cause and aggravate cardiovascular disease. As to concerns expressed by one council member that developers will be stuck with the sunk infrastructure costs of gas hookups when the laws and codes are in effect, those developers should simply stop building with gas now. We all know that electrification is coming. We have excellent options, from induction stoves to heat pumps to thermal energy networks, that save owners and residents money, increase comfort and ease of use, and reduce climate-killing emissions. There is simply no reason to wait. The Codes Council has always had an underappreciated role in protecting the buildings and people of our state. This is a moment when the Council can win the recognition it deserves by leading the nation in shaping a smart energy transition that benefits our health, our safety, and our climate. Please move quickly to update the building codes to meet the CLCPA and AEBA guidelines. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Danielle Sterling, followed by Deb Peck-Kelleher. All right, you should be unmuted now.
My name is Danielle Strelay. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Danielle Strelay. I work in digital media and have a part-time job at the Cheese Shop in Essex Market in New York City. I remember very viscerally learning about global warming in second grade during the late 80s. There was a magazine cover and stories about it on TV, and we talked about it at school, and I was aghast. Rising seas, droughts and storms, death to the animals, terrifying. What were we doing to fix this problem? I was 7 years old and could not stop talking about it at dinner. My parents were both computer programmers for one of the country's biggest insurance companies, managing databases of policyholders and making web tools for the actuaries assessing risk. And my parents heard my climate anxiety and assured me by the time it got to be a problem, the government and businesses would figure out how to fix it with technology. My teachers told me about all the cool new ways we could get power from the sun and the wind, and that sounded great to me. And I trusted that the adults were on it, and I went about with the business of being a kid. Fast forward, it's been 30 years. Global warming is now called the climate crisis. There's wildfires everywhere, and the weather cycles between heat domes and increasingly severe storms. That big insurance companies stopped selling home insurance policies in Florida after a string of hurricanes in the 2000s. And a few weeks ago, they announced that they will no longer write homeowner policies in California due to fire risk. And we're still burning fossil fuels all day, every day in our homes. We have the technology to stop burning fossil fuels. Renewables like solar and wind and geothermal are all well developed, and these industries have been ready to take off and transform the economy. Innovations in building technologies like heat pumps and induction stoves and home efficiency are here, but we've been slow to deploy them. As a society, what are we doing to prevent the catastrophic storms and toxic clouds and deadly heat waves caused by this pollution? What would I tell my own kids if I have them? The causes of pollution causing the climate crisis are many, and because of all the slow walking and misinformation from the fossil fuel industry, we have to move quickly on every front. In New York State, buildings are the largest source of this pollution, and after decades of inaction by everybody else, a lot of the power to fix these problems lies in state government and code development committees like this. We desperately need rules from the state that force a move away from old toxic fossil fuels destroying the planet. We can stop installing new gas lines, and we can set new standards for home efficiency and new construction and renovations. You have the opportunity to make ambitious rules that prioritize clean energy technologies and set an example for the rest of the world, because what we do in New York State spreads worldwide. So setting good rules in compliance with the Climate Action Council recommendations and the All Electric Buildings Act will speed the deployment of these efficient, clean technologies, create tons of jobs, and help save the planet. Your families will be so proud of you, and future generations will be grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, up next we have Deb Peck Kelleher, followed by Kara Battaglia. Deb, you should be unmuted now.
Hello, thank you. I'm Deb Peck Kelleher, the Deputy Director of the Alliance for Clean Energy New York. We are a member-driven association with a mission to promote the use of clean, renewable electricity technologies and energy efficiency in New York in order to increase energy diversity and security, boost economic development, and improve public health and reduce air pollution. AIDS New York supports an updated building code that expedites electrification. We work for the passage and the signature of the Advanced Building Codes and Appliance and Equipment Efficiency Standard Act of 2022 last year. The law requires the Energy Code to be revised to achieve the state's clean energy and climate agenda and to implement the Climate Action Plan, which was finalized last December. We want to thank the Council for incorporating the Advanced Building Code law into the recently released draft Energy Code, but would stress that the law also requires the code to include the recommendations in the Climate Action Plan. The 2019 Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act includes the Department of State in the list of agencies that must issue regulations to contribute to achieving the statewide greenhouse gas emission limits. This year, the All Electric Buildings Act was signed into law and requires the Energy Code on or after December 31st, 2025 to, quote, prohibit the installation of fossil fuel equipment and building systems in any new building not more than 7 stories in height. ACE New York would like to thank the council for stating that they will comply with both of these laws in their next draft version of the code, and that an updated state building code is an integral part of the state meeting its climate emission reduction goals. The building sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions from our heating, cooling, and hot water systems that are fueled by heating oil or natural gas. Recently released studies show that the level of indoor air pollution from the use of natural gas stoves is outrageous. As we transition to an all-electric future, purchasers of new homes should not be saddled with having to upgrade their appliances or furnaces as we start to wind down our use of fossil fuels in the state. These homes should be the leaders in our new climate-forward New York. The Building Council needs to update the code to ensure that it meets the recently updated Building Codes and Standards Law, the All Electric Buildings Law, and the state's Climate Action Plan. This is necessary to reduce our climate emissions, reduce indoor air pollution, and to not burden new homeowners with outdated fossil-based appliances. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, up next we have Kara Battaglia, followed by Mike Fazio. Kara, you should be unmuted now.
You hear me?
We can.
Okay. Kara Lee Battaglia, Building Performance Contractors Association of New York State, representing hundreds of energy certified contractors in every county of New York State, New York City, and Long Island. It's urgent that building code revisions in New York State proactively support electrification of new construction, address the recommendations of the Climate Action Council, and reduce disproportionate impacts on disadvantaged communities. There's a lot of politicians, policy gurus, and special interest groups supporting state and federal policy energy steps. But the contractors care about implementing this in practice. And the one entity that can move the needle on this is you, because building codes are critical to construction and best practices, quality control, and cost to the general public. With federal IRA implementation, we will see a flood of people trying to install heat pumps, insulation, etc., on top of New York's aggressive energy initiatives. The reality is strict requirements must be met to actually ensure that they really make the building energy efficient. Right now, too many do not. You're the gatekeeper for that. Building code revision must include efficiency in practice that is critical to New York State building and consumer needs. In residential and commercial sectors, energy requirements and building codes for new buildings are the single most important measure for energy efficiency, particularly in times of high construction activity. Codes also serve as the efficiency target for improvements of existing buildings. So today's requirements for new building codes will lower or increase consumer refurbishment costs for the next 30 years. Lost opportunities in new construction phase will lead to increased costs later and can wildly inflate the running costs for future taxpayers. Building-related end uses like heating, cooling, ventilation, and hot water require 75% of a residential building's energy demand. Building codes address these drivers of building-related consumption. To meet state and federal goals, we need you to implement efficiency-focused codes to protect our customers. Our customers care about 4 things that progressive energy codes would protect: cost, comfort, health, and safety. Building codes are a critical piece of protecting building owners and users in New York State from energy poverty or installation abuses. In conclusion, we need you to set, enforce, and regularly update building performance best practice requirements for energy efficiency in new buildings within building codes. You are the gatekeeper. What you do now will pave the way for the next 30 years of energy efficiency protections and savings for New York State. This isn't just a green philosophy or policy issue. This is an economic mandate, and you don't have time to defer this or move gradually. We thank you for stating you're going to add the all-electric building law in the fall, but it isn't enough to approach it solely from policy recommendations. This must be practice-based. Bring building code up to meet progressive energy mandates in the most practical ways, or you will inadvertently negatively affect multiple industries, thousands of businesses, and millions of New York State taxpayers, building owners, and users over the next 30 years. I thank you for your time and consideration today.
Thank you so much.
I'll just make a quick announcement to say we have an estimated about 10 people left on the list for the benefit of everybody.
Thanks, Ken.
Next up, we have Mike Fazio, followed by Stephen McDaniel. Mike, you should be
My name is
unmuted.
Mike. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Fazio. I'm the Executive Vice President of the New York State Builders Association. We understand electrification in new construction is the law and will be implemented starting January 1st of 2026, as was outlined earlier this morning. And our members stand ready to build these homes commencing January 1st of 2026. My comments today are related to home building projects that are currently in different stages, that are in the pipeline, that have started recently or about to start, may start early 2024. And someone mentioned earlier today, it's important to understand that a property owner or builder commits early to filing and hiring professionals and working drawings and specifications. And it's important to understand that installing the infrastructure alone for these projects can take up to a year. And we're concerned about the absence of a clear grandfathering provision for these type of projects. And in short, we're looking for guidance from the Code Council. And I think we need to have that sooner than later, because the projects are about to start now or have recently started, or as I said, would be starting in early 2024. We have submitted a letter to the Code Council and the Secretary of State, and would welcome any conversation going forward about having that guidance. And I'd like to thank the Code Council for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, we have Stephen McDaniel, followed by Christopher Roth. Stephen, you should be unmuted.
I'm not going to speak on the version 2.0 documents other than to agree with the testifier from the BDC. These documents need to be provided earlier. That was 1,300 plus pages. Even if I didn't sleep, that's 55 pages an hour to try to review. So I would just ask the council to direct staff to make sure the documents are available sooner. I do want to mention or make a comment about what was mentioned with regards to the executive law change to 381 that goes into effect May 3rd of 2026 with regards to the public health law, section 1377. Again, this is just passing more Department of State work onto the local code enforcement personnel. That section says that the local code official has to make a determination of compliance with 1377. Reading 1377 as a code official, I'm not sure how I will determine that the Department of Health developed a registry. I'm not sure how I will know if the department provided a notice to the owner. I don't think that intent was to say these kinds of things. The commissioner has to promulgate regulations and establish an annual inspection. Again, it's work that the Department of Health needs to do. What needs to happen is only merely a check of a website from the Department of Health. This shouldn't be a mandate on local code officials to be demanding more and more documentation that's already required to be received by the Department of Health and let them do their work. That law does say that they do have to actually do the inspections and do follow-up. The next thing I want to talk about is the energy codes. I think everybody's heard a lot about the energy codes. One bit of advice, there's many court cases that are out there, the Berkeley case in California, the state of Washington currently, and that was filed, I believe, yesterday, the day before yesterday, and the state of North Carolina. So please have a plan B. Owners and developers had the opportunity to make an all-electric building forever. It was their choice. But again, I believe it should have been an incentive, but that ship has sailed, and it is a mandate in the state of New York. But the laws talk about inconsistencies and conflicting provisions. And again, no different than what I mentioned about the lead paint public health law issue, don't place more burden on the local code officials. When a Department of Environmental Conservation comes up with a regulation, there's no need to duplicate it in the building code and make sure that the building official or local code official has to go out and do something. If the Department of Environmental Conservation has to do something, let them do that job. There was some comments that I would like to just say something about. There was a comment about smart panels, and again, I don't want you to be fooled by the concept of a smart panel. A smart panel is just a load controller. It will not reduce the requirement for increasing the size of an electrical panel. All a smart panel does is allows a homeowner to decide when to turn off a breaker, other than physically being there to turn off the breaker. It still would require, with electrification and solar ready and electric ready, those panels would still have to be sized accordingly.
Steve, I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyway,
I heard thank you and I heard
You said thank you.
Okay. Christopher Roth is up next, and then Stephanie Fox, but I just want to point out, Stephanie, it doesn't look like I have an ability to unmute you, so I'm not sure if you don't have a microphone, but when we get to you, I will see what I can do. So just a minute, I will unmute Christopher Roth. Christopher, it's not letting me unmute you. It says you're locked.
We hear something.
I don't know who that is.
I believe that's me.
That's me. Who's me?
This is Stephanie Fox.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll go to Stephanie Fox next.
Sure. Thank you to the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council for convening this meeting and for providing me with the opportunity to testify today. My name is Stephanie Fox, and I'm the Strategic Organizer for Environmental and Climate Justice here at the New York City Comptroller's Office. As the city's chief accountability officer, the Comptroller takes a long-term view in managing the risks facing the city, including the climate risks that threaten New York City's physical, social, and financial future. We're deeply committed to a just transition toward a more equitable, low-carbon, resilient New York. As a member of New York City Council, Comptroller Lander was instrumental in the passage of Local 197, the city's Green Buildings Law. He remains proud of the city's efforts to manage emissions from buildings, a leading contributor to the city's climate emissions through this landmark law. The CLCP, passed by the state legislature soon after, spread both bold emissions reduction goals across our state. In its current role, the Comptroller is committed to seeing through our communities to emissions reductions in our city, in our state, through strong rules, legislation, and prudent updates to our building codes. Since the last code update, 3 major pieces of legislation have passed at the state level that should be reflected in the new 2024 code update. 1. The scoping plan developed by the CLCPA as part of by the Climate Action Council as part of the CLCPA, which was finalized in December of 2022, created a strong framework to meet New York City's state goals to cut emissions by 50% by 2030 and 85% by 2050. These goals will require serious work to scale up solar, clean energy, our grid, cap emissions, and transform buildings. The scoping plan made several recommendations for new codes, including updating regulations to improve energy efficiency and building resistance, adapting regulations to end-site greenhouse gas emissions, and facilitating clear permitting processes for building decarbonization technologies. 2. The Advanced Code Standards Act updated state energy policy to incorporate the greenhouse gas reduction mandates of the CLCPA and directs the code to achieve greater energy savings and energy efficiency measures. It also gives this council authority to promote clean energy features in building design. And lastly, the All-Electric Buildings Act, which was passed this year and requires zero-emission new construction starting in 2026, along with electrification-ready requirements. In accordance with these major pieces of legislation, we encourage this body to take bold action to implement final rules that incentivize early electrification by lowering the carbon emissions factor for buildings that complete these retrofits early, as a step in assisting residential buildings to fly through retrofits. New York City Department of Buildings, New York The Department of Building must continually evaluate the rules to ensure that these goals are being met, to collaborate with the Department of Housing Preservation and Development and the New York City Authority to support needs of building owners in the upcoming years. We're optimistic about the leadership of the State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council to make clear and prudent updates that our commitments require of buildings. This is an exciting and historic code update, and in New York State and New York City have been taking significant action legislative to address building emissions. And now the code needs to reflect that action. Unquestionably, this update has the potential to bring wide-ranging environmental, health, and economic benefits to all New Yorkers. Thank you very much for letting me speak today.
Thank you so much.
All right, I'm going to jump back, try Christopher Roth again, and then Donald Corkery will be next. Okay, so it's not letting me unmute Christopher Roth. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Am I in now?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Perfect, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Christopher Roth. I'm the president of the New York State Fire Marshal and Inspectors Association. I represent close to 200 fire safety and code officials for the state of New York. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking State Fire Administrator Cable for a presentation on residential sprinklers and providing some information to the council as well as folks that were online today. Well, I'd like to go on the record by saying that we support the code to be proposed to be adopted as written at this time without any possible deletions and minimal administrative modifications. As I've been sitting through waiting for my time to come up, I did have an opportunity to listen to many energy code advocates come on, and I'd like to steal one of their taglines, if I may. Most of them said that they had the technology available for the elimination of fossil fuels and other things to make our homes better and to reduce hazards within that home. So for speaking as an advocate for residential sprinklers, I'm going to steal that tagline and say, I think we have the technology on that basis as well. We've demonstrated the sprinklers are a reliable fire safety partner, and we should work towards trying to get those installed in our homes, residents, and businesses to protect the population. So I would advocate at this point to ask the Code Council for serious consideration for the adoption of sprinkling 1- and 2-family dwellings as well as townhouses at this time. Thank you for my time.
Thank you so much.
All right, Donald Corkery is next, followed by Angelica Savandra. Donald, you should be unmuted.
Okay, you guys can hear me?
We can.
Sure. Don, my stopwatch is going because I can talk about sprinklers for days. All right. I'm the president of the Association of Fire Districts, New York State. 9 years ago, and let me tell you this first, we represent 894 fire districts in the state of New York. I was elected president of the state fire chief 9 years ago, and I brought to the floor the fact that residential sprinklers was taken out of the code. We have to get that back in there. We have to approve it. Somebody mentioned seat belts today. It's as simple as wearing your seatbelt. Residential sprinklers. I thank, as my previous speaker did, Chief Cable for that great presentation on the stats. The stats speak for themselves. And I know somebody questioned the stats and how they're, but it's already proven that sprinklers save buildings. So why would we want it to save people? Pretty simple. Sprinklers save buildings, so why not save people as long as we can do that? Today, we're looking at the ion battery situation. Given that inside residential homes, we're looking at a nightmare. Looking at this CPCPA and all electric, there's some things that need to be in that as well. We know the debate on sprinklers. Our friends in the building industry and the realty industry and the insurance, I would ask you to get behind us and help save lives. We do not want to be known as the Empire State for fire deaths, which this year, I think as of today, we're with the 4 deaths this week in New York City, we're up to almost 90. So it's pretty crazy that we still can't get this done. I read a statement back in 2014 that was filmed and sent to then Governor Cuomo, and it reads as such: I believe the single most important thing that we can do as this generation's legislators, firefighters, and code enforcement people is to pass enact the sprinkler code for single-family residential homes. I'm sure none of you have had the unpleasant job of standing in front of a home burning, knowing that their lives are inside and we can do nothing. And I'm not going to dwell on that. I've had that unfortunate pleasure. It's mind-boggling that we can't get everybody on the same page a little bit. Like I said, we need the builders, the realtors, the insurance companies to join us with it and make it reality. Our friends in government, as I call our legislators, they love that term.
Donald, I have to ask you to wrap up.
Okay, yep, all right, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I had Angelica Savandra next, but it does not appear as though they are still on. So I'm going to go to Kim Fraksick, followed by Martha Sickles. Okay, Kim, you should be unmuted now.
My name is Kim Frachek. Thank you for hearing our testimonies today. I'm the director of Sane Energy Project. For the past 12 years, we've worked successfully to halt several fossil fuel projects in New York State, and we've grown to 20,000 advocates across the state. We were able to halt projects like an LNG port and a fracked gas pipeline that would have destroyed our precious New York City ocean and waterfront economies. Sorry. Somebody's calling. And like pipelines that would have clear-cut massive forests in the Catskill Mountains and poisoned the Niagara River. Like a power plant that was choking the life out of children as young as 3 years old suffering with asthma. We were able to protect New Yorkers because we had laws in place and generations before us worked hard to pass to prevent these types of travesties that we see in our New York building stock today when society's economic system is compromised by polluting industries. You began this public hearing by expressing that there are many registrants here to speak because we're passionate. This is not about passion. This is about protecting our lives and building a system of governance for future generations that will prioritize health, equity, safety, and democracy. As dramatic as that may sound to you all, we're here to shine a spotlight on this council to express how important your job is right now. I grew up in Pennsylvania. It is not as fortunate as New York. The water reservoir I grew up on is poisoned because of a liquid fracked gas pipeline leak. Pennsylvania has a long history of trading health and safety of its residents for industry 100% of the time that have only made a few wealthy and the rest of the population working to sustain the wealth of a few through the steel age, the coal age, and now the fracking age. By any standards of ethics, that is wrong. That's why I come here to you today to talk about how important your job is right now. In my work, we spend years organizing and negotiating to pass bills that would help transition New York to a renewable economy. I urge this council to adopt the All Electric Buildings Act into our building code and the Climate Action Council's recommendations. Another council that was created because several of us came together and sat in a room in January 2015 to plant seeds of what would become the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act that was passed in 2019. Then we slogged through a process to develop the CAC that would make decisions on how our law would be implemented. Meanwhile, corporate utilities feverishly expanded their gas networks, ensuring that they could protect their business model for decades to come. I want to highlight Bill, the building developer appointee from Buffalo.
15 seconds.
During this time, pardon?
You have 15 seconds.
Well, okay.
I just want to say, don't keep us trapped in 19th century technology in the 21st century, because it's hard work. We're all here to figure this out together. So let's step up and show the nation what it looks like to lead on climate justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, what I'm going to do next is I have about 5 or 6 people left on the list, so I'm going to read the names I have left. And so if you don't hear your name and you think you signed up to speak, write into Chad Sievers or myself so we can make sure we get you on the list. I have Martha Sickles, Alex Wang, Jeffrey Shapiro, Pete Sikora, John Rath, and Juan Pablo Velez. So Martha.
John Rath spoke earlier.
Say it again?
John Rath spoke earlier. First on your list.
John Rath did? Okay. Being informed, John Rath is not on the list. Martha, I'm going to find your name and unmute you now. All right, you should be unmuted.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak on the amendments to the New York State Uniform Code and Energy Code. My name is Martha Sickles, and I'm founder of Urbicon LLC, an organization that engages in urban planning and building decarbonization services. We recently completed a NYSERDA-funded Clean Heat campaign where we installed air source heat pumps in over 50 residential buildings in Brooklyn, sponsored by the Brooklyn Borough President's Office and NYC 2030 District. And I have to say, most of our clients are thrilled with the increased health efficiency, safety, and comfort provided by their newly weatherized and electrified buildings. So as many people have said, buildings are the predominant source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State, and in New York City, 70% of the emissions. So your work in assisting in decreasing their emissions is critical. The State Climate Scoping Plan provides a great framework for how New York will achieve net zero emissions, increasing renewable use, and ensuring that all communities equitably benefit in the clean energy transition. So hopefully you will be including all of their recommendations in your 2024 Uniform Code revisions. The codes also must reflect and facilitate New York State and cities' mandates that all newly constructed buildings will be all electric beginning in 2025. New York City at this moment is in the process of reviewing proposed zoning text amendments, City of Yes for carbon neutrality, which are designed to remove impediments to and expand opportunities for decarbonization, renewable energy projects, and expanding roof use for solar, facilitating envelope improvements and equipment placement for electrification of buildings and electric vehicle chargers. These text amendments will certainly help with some of the code changes. I urge the members of the council to take the opportunity to take similar actions in your code update by including the recommendations of the Climate Action Scoping Plan, the requirements of the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act, the Advanced Code and Standards Act, and recently passed All Electric Building Act. Finally, an important consideration in your amendments is to ensure the code amendments will not disproportionately burden communities classified as disadvantaged with greenhouse gas emissions. I thank the council for this opportunity to testify today and for your considering the comments made by all today and your important work to help New York reach its climate goals. Many thanks for what you do.
Thank you so much.
Alex Wang is up next, followed by Jeffrey Shapiro. Alex, you should be unmuted. Are you there, Alex? Okay, move on.
Move on.
All right. So next up, Jeffrey Shapiro, followed by Pete Sikora. Jeffrey, you should be unmuted now.
I'm Jeff Shapiro, Executive Director of the IRC Fire Sprinkler Coalition. For many years, New York has actually been ahead of a number of states with respect to residential fire safety by requiring residential dwellings that are 3 or more stories above grade plane to have fire sprinklers. But New York is clearly falling behind with respect to protection of townhouses. With 11 states, the District of Columbia, and a lot of other jurisdictions adopting and enforcing the IRC requirement for new townhouses to have fire sprinklers, including the nearby states of Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. It's not clear why New York would not follow the model code and adopt the IRC provision as written. These other states have found a way to affordably build houses, townhouses specifically, with fire sprinklers. And New York is already doing this for townhouses that are 3 or more stories in height. I can't come up with a reason why New York wouldn't be capable of accomplishing what your neighbors and others have accomplished. To the point brought up earlier about New York being unique by having different rural and metropolitan areas, I can tell you that every state has that. But that's not relevant to townhouses because townhouses are typically built in urban areas or suburban areas with a public water supply. What I'm hoping to accomplish this cycle is closing the gap between New York, the model codes, and neighboring states. At a minimum, I'm hoping that you'll be able to make some incremental progress by at least adopting the IRC requirement to install fire sprinklers in all new townhouses. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have 3 people left. It'll be Pete Sikora, followed by Juan Pablo Velez and Peter Bargolio. Sorry. All right, Pete Sikora, you should be unmuted now.
New York Communities for Change. We're a community-based organization working on economic justice, housing, immigration, climate action. We organize members in low-income communities of color in New York City and on Long Island and have a large active membership. And we've been doing a lot of work to drive state policy around building decarbonization. We want good jobs, pollution reductions, and cost savings via energy efficiency, and think that New York State can become the center of an energy efficiency industry, especially as Local Law 97 sets a pace. We're very proud of that. The truth is that New York State has done enormous damage historically as an emitter, much larger than lots of places, and so it's fitting that we lead. But that's not what's happening right now through the council, and we need you to push and get out of the comfort zone that is the small c conservatism of the industry. We need you to align with the state's laws, but more importantly, exert leadership beyond that. Other parts of state government are going to need to mobilize much more money in this transition too, to subsidize decarbonization, but you have to do your job. And unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of evidence that the council is foot dragging. So we're one of the groups that wrote to you a while ago concerned that you were ignoring state law. And I'm more concerned about that now listening to this meeting. Ultimately, this is the governor's responsibility. And, we urge Governor Hochul to get this straight here, but the Building Code Council needs to act. So along with other groups, we wrote to you about these kinds of issues. And now we're hearing talk about compliance with the All Electric Building Act. That requires the Building Codes Council to incorporate the Climate Action Council's recommendations to the full extent feasible, not just review the law or options. And your draft updates do not include the electrification of new construction as required by the All Electric Building Act, the recommendations of the Climate Action Council included in the scoping plan as required by the Building Codes and Standards Act. It doesn't include a determination of whether the proposed 2024 building code update will be inconsistent with the state's greenhouse gas pollution reduction goals as required by the CLCPA. And it doesn't include a determination as to if the 2024 building code update would disproportionately impact disadvantaged communities with pollution, again, under the CLCPA. At the end of the day, the climate damage that we're seeing is absolutely horrific. Unless you're a climate denier or ideological, I think people of good faith and thinking can agree that this is an emergency and that the decisions that you make are vital now. You can't foot drag anymore. You have to do your job and get this done. So thank you for listening to my, I suppose, somewhat harsh testimony, but you got to get your act together and stop dragging this out.
Thank you.
Okay, Juan Pablo Velez does not actually appear to be on anymore, so I'll go to the last person on my list, which is Peter Bardaglio. All right, Peter, you should be unmuted now.
Thank you. My name is Peter Bardaglio. I serve as the Executive Director of the Ithaca 2030 District, a high-performance building district in downtown Ithaca established in 2016. We belong to a network of 24 such districts in the U.S. and Canada. Appreciate the opportunity to comment on the proposed changes to the Energy Conservation Construction Code. The Ithaca 2030 District currently consists of 44 member buildings and 584,381 square feet of committed commercial space in the city. The 2030 District provides a non-competitive atmosphere where building owners, community organizations, and professionals can come together to share best practices and common challenges, as well as other information that will improve building operations and increase asset value. In short, we seek to accelerate market transformation and the energy transition in Ithaca's built environment. As we all know, the building sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in New York State. Electric heat pumps and water heaters, induction stoves, and electric dryers are dramatically more efficient than their oil and gas-fired counterparts. Building electrification reduces energy use and pollution and improves comfort, savings, and health. These are the facts that drove the thinking behind the All-Electric Building Act passed in the recently concluded session of the state legislature. The Building Code Council cannot simply ignore this new law as it considers updates for the 2024 code. As others have pointed out, it must comply with this and other state electrification laws in its proposed changes. For those who say we can't afford building electrification, we're demonstrating in Ithaca that it makes economic as well as environmental sense. For example, a recent project involving 15 apartments and 25 houses met both the Passive House standard and the LEED Platinum standard, resulting in net zero homes. This new construction included excellent insulation and air sealing, as well as electric heating. The cost was $150 a square foot versus $200 a square foot for conventional construction in our region. It's possible, in other words, to build homes that do not use fossil fuels and are extremely energy efficient and affordable. Ithaca's energy code, adopted in 2021, stipulates that all new construction must be fossil-free by 2026. Already, many developers, realizing the cost savings involved and the ability to attract and retain tenants, have abandoned gas and oil as they move forward with our projects in Ithaca. Developers carrying out major renovations of existing buildings are moving in the same direction. Urban Core LLC, for example, has shown multiple times how to transform old structures in downtown Ithaca into fresh-looking, low-carbon buildings that help create a vibrant neighborhood. The same is true of other renovations involving existing buildings in Ithaca. Among them, Purity Ice Cream, the Argus Inn, and the Whole Architects and Tatum Engineering offices. Building owners turn to electrification and decarbonization in each of these cases, not just because it was the right thing to do, but because it was the smart thing. The Building Code Council will make a serious mistake if it does not embrace this future. The new state laws demand it, yes, but also
I'll ask you to stop.
insists on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. That is the end of my list.
Okay. Is there anyone else that wishes to address the council today? Okay. First, I'll just thank everyone for their who offered their thoughtful public comment today. We appreciate it. With no one else on the list, I am closing public comment for this meeting. And that brings us to agenda item 6, which is future meetings. The next meeting of the Code Council in 2023 will be September 22nd, and we are also scheduled for December 1st. We will likely, before the September meeting, be sending you potential dates for 2024. So be on the lookout. Let us know your availability. Nothing else there. We move to agenda item 7. Is there any other business to come before the council today? Okay, hearing none. I'm just going to take a moment. I know we've been here a while, but I'm just going to take a moment. I want to thank staff for all their hard work leading into this meeting. I know that things are getting to you at a later and later period. I know that it's, that we're kind of relying on the meeting period, and, trying to think ahead, but, and we're, we're late getting stuff to you. We will try and do better. But as you know, there's a lot to do. I'd like to thank Jim Cable for his thoughtful presentation today. And I want to thank the members for hanging with us through that long meeting. Minutes and videos, I know this was asked a bunch on the chat. Minutes and video will be posted online shortly. So with no other business coming before the council today, we stand adjourned.